Are we meant to be saying all this?
I know you don't fish for free.
Does anyone?
Yeah, some of us do.
Are you allowed to say that?
Yeah. Rigs for from a hybrid feeder fishing.
Right.
That I've never shown anyone.
You've never shown anyone?
No.
No.
It's actually the only one I've ever used that I thought maybe it's better than pineapple.
No,
really.
statement.
These conversations made me think about something.
That's ridiculous.
But you have to use a
Can't be ignored.
No.
It's obvious.
That's
No,
not a
That's obviously
coincidence.
quite-
The Fishing Gurus podcast.
What we've been up to, boys? You've been all over the place, haven't you two?
Yeah, we have done a bit of fishing together, haven't we?
We filmed a Dublin Spooner Versus at Raysbury, which is my syndicate water at the moment, on
Nice.
the RK Leisure ticket, which is unreal. And then we've done something that you boys have been doing quite a lot of recently, which is an underwater film at Carp Lantis. And we caught the biggest fish we've ever caught on an underwater film. So we've had a good time, yeah.
And we've done even more of what these boys do because we fished a match at the weekend.
Oh yeah, we did, and we come third.
Yeah, we don't celebrate that.
Oh, that's very topical. for
Yeah,
this podcast,
how about that?
Isn't it?
Talk about timing.
Yeah. Match anglers. What about you, Steve? You've had a busy few weeks, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been to Spain, obviously for the World Championships.
What actually doing the World Champs?
Yeah, the World Champs in Spain.
Oh.
Yeah, we come fifth, and I was sixth individual.
That's good.
Could I have won before you asked? Yes. So we'll move on.
Oh, could you?
Yeah, I reckon so. Yeah.
You reckon you
I
made
was-
mistakes?
I was 1 kilo off bronze individual, and
Oh, wow.
4 kilo off gold.
And what are we talking average size of fish that you're catching?
Like 900 grams. So that's
800
five.
In ounces?
Five out. Obviously,
Yeah.
if you take it on the second day,
Yeah.
I needed 4 kilo, and I've had I think I had 90 fish, so another 5's not.
Do you
unachievable.
pretty much always feel like that you could have won though?
Yeah, because I'm massively self-critical.
Yeah. So,
I don't think you might be as well, but I don't think you can fish perfectly.
No, I don't think anyone ever fishes perfectly. I always leave the swim thinking, how many fish could you possibly have caught from that swim,
Yes.
no matter what. But that's not a healthy way to be, because you always feel like, I don't know if I've done as well
Yeah,
as
it's
I
like
should
you're never
have there.
celebrating a good result.
Yeah,
you
that's not
You
good.
can still
but-
celebrate, but I think being really self-critical and analytical helps me improve,
Yeah, for sure.
rather than because a lot of people don't catch and they go, they just weren't there.
Yeah.
Whereas they probably were there, but you didn't
Yeah,
quite
you haven't-
get it
yeah,
right. Yeah,
that's fair.
And I think it's important to be honest
Yeah.
with yourself. That's the best way. So I've always said, if I was going to write a book, it would be called Hindsight, Best Angler in the World.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, that's
there
good.
we go.
Oh, hey, get right and I'll bite, Steve.
No, but hindsight
No, it's
wins.
true.
In
Yeah,
match
yeah.
angling, hindsight wins every match.
Yeah.
Because you listen in the pub or the club afterwards, and it's
Yeah.
always like, if I'd have just done that,
Yeah.
I'd have won this.
Well, you don't know you've done it wrong until you've done it wrong. Yeah, that's
No.
the thing. It's like even like recasting times and things like that.
Yes.
You just think, should you recast every 3 or 4 hours, or should I do it every 10?
3 or 4 hours. I've only got 5.
for carp fishing? But if you leave it for a long period of time and you don't catch it, you feel like I've just wasted all of that time.
Yeah.
But you don't know you've wasted it until you've done it all. So it's like
Hindsight.
hindsight. Yeah.
Best angler in the world.
Yeah, I'm gonna nick that one.
I tell you what, I always think this as well, though. Like, you criticise yourself, but you're one of the best, and you've sat there for 5 hours giving it everything you can possibly give. Like, you've probably got more from it than 99.9% of people. So to then itch another 5% or 10%, it's a massive ask when you put the amount of effort. I bet you boys are the same.
But
Yeah.
that's why he's one of the best, isn't
Yeah,
Yeah, but if you don't think that way, then it's not productive.
Totally
Like
agree.
if you just think, I've done really well, and just shoot off home and don't think about it again, then you'll do the same again next time, and people will get better than you. So I think it's even if you've done really well, be critical, like Steve's saying, and get another 2 or 3% for the next trip, and you just always stay in front of everyone.
1,000,000%.
Yeah, for sure.
1,000,000%. Great to have us all sat down, boys. Every time we get our heads together in the office over a cup of tea, in and out of doors,
Yeah.
passing in the corridor, we're always fist pumping, saying we need to do something together.
And here we are.
We've done it. We're
Here
sat
we are.
down.
Yeah. I still want to have a match against you two, though.
That's going to be the outro of the podcast.
Choked on me more. I mean, yeah, me too. Yeah.
We'd have to think of a way of it being, because we've
Fair,
had
yeah.
matches before, haven't we? And I think it's unfair that the carp angler has got 2 rods,
Or
because-
he's spodding over the top.
or he's spodding
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
top. Because
Kind of
I
3
beat
rods.
you once. Do you remember?
No.
At
Sorry?
Cudmore. You wouldn't remember.
No, I don't remember.
No, but I
Three,
did.
3 rods, 2 rods to fish with, and a spod rod.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's 3 rods in
Yeah.
my eyes.
Yeah.
yeah, okay, so yeah, way too many rods really, because it often ends up that the extra rods obviously does catch you more carp. But we must be able to figure out a way. Does anyone else know a way of making it
Leveling
fair?
it, yeah.
Yeah. Because we need to fish for fish that we can both fish for. So it's normally like singles to double pound carp, I suppose, something like that. And then we just think of a way of it being fair, and then we can have a good go against.
What's wrong with you all 11-1 rod?
Sorry?
What's wrong with you all 11-1 rod?
Yeah, Tom.
Well, because then we're literally just playing you at your game.
Yeah, you're
So
playing two of the
then
best.
it's like you come in to do carp fishing with 3 rods. We would catch more than you, I think, because we've done it more.
I suppose, what about then? You have 2 rods, but if you want to spot over the top, you have to bring one of the rods in to do that. Like, we'd have to do that. We couldn't we couldn't have a feeder in and then spot over the top. We'd have to wind it in, pick our other rod up to feed, and then cast it in, put it down, then pick the rod up to fish and carry on.
Right, okay, so you're not allowed 3 rods in the game at the same time.
You're not allowed 2.
Not allowed 2 rods in the game at the same time.
This is like fishing's versions of like boxing and MMA crossover, isn't it? That's what it feels like.
But you're allowed to fish with 2.
If they've got 2,
No,
we've
no,
got
So you're basically just match fishing then.
Yeah.
level
But
playing field.
you're the 2 best match fishermen in the world. we're gonna lose.
With 2 legs, 1 our rules, 1 your rules.
That's true.
That's a good shout.
That's
Yeah,
a
but
good-
then
yeah,
you'll
that would
just end up winning your one, and we'll just end up winning our one.
Don't know.
Do you think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we'd have more chance, depending on where you took us,
yeah, maybe.
home and away.
Yeah, but we'd just take you to somewhere with big carp in. That you have to fish 120 yards.
As long as it's not
Neatly.
We
much
might
further
even
than
need
that.
to cast overhead for that, might we?
Yeah, I don't know. We can think of something, I'm sure. Because I would like.
Let's put it
So,
out
to
there.
be honest, I would actually just like to sit next to you boys and watch you fish.
Yeah, same.
I watched a couple of them. Well, I watched one of them. The live. It's not because it's not live, is it? Your fishing matches where it's basically feels like you're sitting next to you whilst doing. I think they're great. Them, like 'cause people
Getting
actually
inside the mind.
get to see you actually fish. Like, I'd like to just sit next to you for the day and watch you do it. I think that'd be great.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that, mate.
What's that? Oh, no, you filmed it. Yeah, there's loads of improvements that could have been there.
Yeah, the fishing was great, but the filming.
No, it's really good, type. Honestly, I think it's great to be able to sit down and do that.
Definitely.
But yeah, we should sort out a match sometime.
That was going to be the end of the podcast, but we've done it at the start.
Oh, right.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
Let's do it. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Always premature.
I've got
Hair loss.
loads of topics I want to talk about with you guys while we're all sat around the table. And the first one, probably the most interesting one for me, is bait wise. I've just been sat in the marketing office this morning, and the guys are talking about the Tom Maker podcast that you've just put out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I have got to listen to that on my way home, but a lot of that's relating to the use of natural baits, in particular worms,
Yeah.
in carp fishing. What's the history of natural baits in carp fishing, and how much does it play a part in your boys' fishing? Because we use them week in, week out for a lot of our stuff. What do you do with natural baits, you guys?
I hadn't used them a great deal. Used them a little bit over the years. I've got a horrendous allergy to maggots. So
Tell me more.
it's like having hay fever. Every time I use maggots, my eyes will start weeping, runny nose, sore throat.
Is that like the ammonia on them?
Yeah, I think so. I've tried everything to get around it. Nothing works. So, but I'm stubborn. If I'm at a lake where I'm having to use maggots or casters to get a bite, then I'll still use them and just deal with the fact I'm going to be ill for a few days. Worms only really came into my fishing, I think it was back in 2019 or 2020, and that was when speaking to Rob Burgess, who was using them, explaining to me that a lot of matches were being won on large quantities. So I had a little play, had a go, caught a few. Well, it definitely needs to be perfected. You can't just chuck a load of worm out and expect to catch a load of fish. But those natural baits, when they're used in decent quantities and they're in the right situation, I don't think there's anything that can compete with them.
Why?
I think the word natural says it all. It's something they're happier to eat. The amino acids coming out of the worms, it's almost like they cannot not eat it.
Do you think that's all the year round as well? Because obviously we use worms, and obviously you're talking carp. But for me, as a normal match angler, there's only a small window where worms are highly effective.
Yeah, I would say for carp anglers, maggots are always seen as a winter thing. All the natural food dies out, and then you offer really easy to eat natural food on a plate on top of a gravel spot. They just mop it all up. It's really easy for them to do, and they love it. But people don't tend to use natural baits in the summer so much. But I think now this whole worm thing's come around a little bit. People are starting to use it a little bit more in the summer. I've used casters since speaking to you boys, because we're obviously in the same offices a lot of the time, probably 6, 7, when was I at Golden Gates?
8 years ago?
7 years ago. Yeah, I started to use casters then. And at the right time of year, on the right spot, they're just incredibly dangerous. Like you don't want anything. It's like you're cheating. It's that easy to catch them. Casters,
because
yeah.
casters, like, to me, they're not got that much attraction.
Right.
As in they're not smelly.
Not really. But
What?
I think that the reason that they don't move and they sit on top of anything you put them out on, and they've got a little bit of crunch to them, and I don't know what nutritional value they've got. Probably not that much.
No, I wouldn't think
No,
so.
I guess they're mostly water.
And
Yeah,
how
but
many?
I've-
how many are you feeding? Like a gallon or
Yeah,
gallons?
gallons,
Yeah.
gallons in the end. But there is a moral side of it as well. Do you think you're feeding fish that are not getting that much out of it? So we do now try to mix them with something that, you know, with boilies and pellet and things like that. So when they do eat it, they are going to get something from it. Because if everyone uses maggots or casters all at the same time, it doesn't do the lake any good. So you do have to think about that at the same time. But the reality is that if you've got a mix with casters and pellet in, that they're eating because of the casters, you know, most of the time.
And casters on the hook on the hair as well.
Yeah, I use like a little hooked on bag of casters and 2 fake casters on the back of the hook, pretty much. And if you get them feeding at short range, you can't use them in all situations because they're quite difficult to use compared to a boilie or compared to pellets. But if you can use them really accurately at short range on clay spots, you can really sort of fine down what you're using. Use like 1 cast from the back of the hook and some a small bag.
What hook for 1 caster, Tom?
Sorry?
What hook for 1 caster?
Like a 16, I should imagine.
Yeah,
18
yeah, an 18, yeah. No, like a 6.
with 1 caster.
Well, with like a red kicker on it and 1 caster on the back of the hook.
That's ridiculous.
But you have to use a hooked on bag of casters with that as well. So you've got
a little
PVA
PVA
bag. Is that
bag.
PVA?
a PVA bag.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. You're talking different lingo.
I don't know if
now.
you meant a mesh bag. Like
No,
Eric.
like
Full of
a
casters.
PVA bag. That's what I'm saying. You have to fish that at short range and be able to recast quite a lot. Because if you haven't got a bite on one, maybe you've just got that hook with a caster on. It's not as effective.
And I presume
But-
there's no head of like roach. in
Yeah,
those
that's I think that's why a lot of the natural baits come more into their own from our point of view through the colder months. Because if you've got a lake that's full of every species, you're inviting everything to come into your swim to have a feed.
Yeah.
So I look at like Boddington, obviously,
Yeah.
which has got like loads of doubles in, which got a massive head of roach. If I spotted casters into there,
You just
the
get loads
roach
of
should
it.
have a
Yeah. It's
probably getting before they've got to the bottom.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Oh, there's lots of things that get in the way of using them. There's only a few circumstances that arise where you can actually use them really well. But yeah, we if you can, I'm happy to use them all the way through the year. But in the summer, there are more problems in using them for sure.
And what obviously is your opinion on worms? Only because
I-
I think there's for my own fishing, there's a really small window like either side of spawning where they're like ridiculous,
Right. Okay.
but then they tend to peter out in
Yeah.
effectiveness.
I'd almost say not just peter out, but at
Become
times for
become
us,
poison.
yeah, could kill your
Yeah, see, I've
peg
heard
dead.
I've heard
Yeah.
this spoken about in match circles.
Yeah, could be detrimental to your swim if
Yeah.
you use them at the wrong time.
I've not ever been that convinced on the whole worm thing. Only because I've used casters before, and I can clearly tell that when I put them out, they work. And maggots, like you use maggots in sort of October, November sort of time, you're just you catch loads, you know. But with the worms, I'd used them a few times, and I thought they're not really having the effect I thought they were going to have. But I think in the right situation, like the situations that Maker and a lot of the match boys use them in, I think when they're good, they're unbearably
they're
deadly.
untouchable.
Yeah, but I haven't used them enough to know when that exactly is. But I listen to you boys all the time. I always say, what bait are you boys using at the minute? One thing that you use quite a lot that we don't is luncheon meat.
Luncheon meat.
There are certain times when they absolutely love
There's
meat.
only 2 windows for that as well. One just coming out of winter, and then one just going into it. Like October, November, September,
Right.
October, November. Luncheon meat is ridiculous.
Why do you think that
I think,
is?
Because I think a lot of the venues we fish, they've had a gut full of pellets
Yeah.
Yeah.
all winter. All summer,
summer.
and then they're looking for a change going into it. They're looking to stock up for winter,
Yeah.
so they just meat becomes like you can feed meat in like June and July,
Yeah.
and they won't touch it. And then in September, October,
Yeah.
they're like
That's all they want.
All they want to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is like cyclical as well,
Yes.
especially with
Good
match
word.
anglers, is that you always you'll use the same thing at the same time, and I do think that if fish eat the same thing for a long period of time, they just almost crave something
Yeah,
else.
I think so as well.
So it's like I'm not necessarily sure that it's the time of the year that's doing it. It's more that when you've when you boys are actually using the same things all the
Yeah,
time.
a week creating that
Because it
cycle.
happens on carp lakes as well. If somebody's using, like, they say it blows, like, oh, the maggots have blown. Like, if everybody uses maggots too much, then they're not as effective. But then you would use boilies on the same water that weren't working before that are now working really well. So it's like you have to always make sure you're doing something different to everyone else, because otherwise you're just part of the mass thing
I
that's
can think
not
of
working as
one
well.
instant. I used to go to Whiteacres for like a couple of weeks in the spring. First week, I remember fishing. Meat was incredible. Like, didn't need to fish with anything else. And then the second week, like 3 hours into one of the matches, I'm throwing meat in, can't get in a few roach, which is always a sign carp aren't interested. Switched it to pellets, and within 2 minutes, it's a carp every drop.
Yeah.
As though like them carp are there all the time, but if you're feeding them the wrong,
they're
or
just not
something
gonna
they've
eat
had
it.
10 days,
Yeah.
they've had a gut full of meat.
Yeah.
They just want to change.
Yeah, that's the reason we should listen to match anglers more. Is your like feedback loop is so much quicker than ours.
Yeah.
Because it's like if we're not expecting a bite for 24 hours anyway, it's very, very difficult to know whether we've got the right bait on or not. Because like the 24 hours pass, you think, oh, maybe I weren't in the right area. I use the same bait again the next trip. But the reality is that maybe you could have caught 5 in that 24 hours if you had the right bait on.
Yeah, it's
And
easier
like
for us though,
you can just tell straight away.
because our waters are obviously higher stock.
Yeah.
And I always say the fish tell you really quick on commercials.
Yeah.
So if you're throwing the wrong bait in, it doesn't take an hour. Is probably too long if you're on the wrong bait. Within 10 minutes, you can tell. Like literally, and like I used to walk along when I used to fish Tunnel Barn a lot. If I didn't know whether it was going to be pellets or maggots, I used to walk along before the start and look at everyone's trays.
Right.
And so I knew what bait everyone. But when I say trays, I mean bait trays. So I know what bait.
Everyone's going to be covering them up now.
So I know what, but I knew what bait they were starting on. So like if I'd start on pellets and I'd be like 2 up, I know he's on maggots. And after 10 minutes, if he'd had like 4 fish and I've got none, it's
You're making the
it's
switch.
a maggot day, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
But the fish, because we've got more fish to go at, like you said, if you're not expecting a bite for 24 hours, how do you tell if you're on the wrong bait?
No, it's very, very difficult. You've got. I always look back on my past like years and think, right, I look at it as months and times to see. Like some lakes I go onto and I think the maggots have been used loads on this. I wouldn't think of using them and think of using something else. But if I'm going onto a lake where the rules are open and everybody's using different things, all I'll look back on is the time of year and think, right, in July last year, cell worked really well, so I'm going to try that this time. Or in September last year, the maggot started working really well, so I'll start using that now. And I will sort of see it as a bit of a thing throughout the year that I'm happy to change bait if it's like hot or if it's good conditions, or if you feel like the fish can digest the food well, you can use boilies at that time of year. And if they're not, then use something that's easy to digest, you know.
Do you keep a record, you boys? Do you write stuff down when things are working or anything like that?
I don't personally. I tend to try to rely on my brain or my memory, which ain't always great. But no, well, I think when I first started carp fishing, I used to write a few bits down, but I just stopped. I don't know if you can't
I don't write
imagine
it
you
down.
write
I can remember it all.
What about you, Steve? Do you write anything down?
I've got a book, but only for like more for when I travel in Europe. So like if we go to a venue, when I get back, I'll write like 3 pages of notes in case we go back. But I don't keep like a week to week journal.
No.
I should, because my memory's absolutely shocking.
But like the quantities that we're dealing with, I suppose, in match fishing is so fine in terms of like the start of a match, we might feed 100 mil of chopped worms in 4 litres of ground bait. And that's the perfect ratio to get your peg off to a good start. If you fed 200 mil of worms in 4 litres, it's detrimental to what happens in your swim.
Really?
Yeah,
detrimental in what way? Because you're
it could
preoccupying the fish. They've got more to eat, so it takes you longer to get a bite. Or...
Yes.
Right.
That would be one example of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you fed more particles at the start in X amount of ground bait, it takes you a lot longer to get fish to start eating your hook bait, or they won't move over the bait as quickly.
Yeah.
Like the quantities are so fine.
What did you say? 100 mil in 4 litres?
Yes.
What's that, like
It's not a lot.
2.5%?
That's
No.
like a pot that big with about that much chopped worm in it,
Right.
and then 4 litres of ground bait would be
4 massive double handfuls like that.
it's a tiny amount of worms compared to what probably you boys feed.
Yeah, but actually, I've had a couple of trips where it's where that's worked. You know, like just a small amount. And actually, Maker only puts a small amount of worms in.
It's almost enough to fire them up,
his whole
isn't
mix,
it?
yeah. Which then works on the sort of moral side of it as well. Is that I think probably worms they probably get a lot out of. They've got it, haven't they?
Nutritionally,
yeah.
Got to
So
be
you're
a
only
good
using
bait.
a small. You're only using a small amount and then adding it with pellets and boilies and everything else in there. I think that's
See,
good.
worms as well in my fishing can be very good for like impact, but not long term. So like, I know you don't fish for bream.
Absolutely not, Steve.
But for like
Does anyone?
Yeah, some of us do.
Are you allowed to say that?
But for bream, you can like not put them in at the start, and then have like 2 casts with them like after 2 hours, and get like an amazing reaction.
Yeah.
But then if you keep putting them in, you completely kill your swim.
Right.
It's like instant attraction for like half an hour, but then you have to take them out again and maybe try them again 2 hours later.
Right. Okay.
But if you keep ploughing the bottom with worms, eventually you build up an area that won't feed over.
Why is that, do you think?
Don't know. Obviously, we saw it in underwater.
It's almost like they become sick of them, I feel. It's a bit like if you was eating a real sweet food almost. You couldn't eat it forever, but like a little bit of it after each meal is palatable and it's nice. And I almost feel like it's little bit like that. Like, here, lads, here's some worms. In they come. Oh, it's gone. But you've had your good run of fish on it.
Yeah.
And if you just kept putting them in, nothing had happened.
Doesn't
But
happen.
if you pull them out, carry on fishing, pick an odd fish off, and almost put up with it being not quite as good, knowing that in 20 minutes you're going to feed another ball with worms in,
have to
and it's
spike
going to go
again.
bang, bang,
Yeah.
bang, bang, bang. Like that impact of like, you can almost feel your catch rate pulsing through the day, like bang, 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 steady it up a little bit, another little run. And you'll hear people say at the end of a match, Ringer's had 3 absolute belting runs of fish, and I've just not had them runs.
Yeah.
And I'm sat there thinking,
I know
well,
what
he's
it's done.
obviously either up to the worms or done something to his bait or...
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think, obviously, with worms, like you put some worms in, you get a great reaction. I need to feed as many worms as possible and fill my swim up. But a lot of time it doesn't work like that. You get that instant hit,
Yeah.
they come in and feed. Then if you keep ploughing worms in, like you start getting loads of line bites, indications, and it's as though the fish aren't happy over it anymore.
Right.
Like
okay.
they know there's bait there, but they won't settle. So like I've had it before where I've like got that initial hit on worms. I'm like, it's a worm day. I'm going to feed as many worms as possible. An hour later, I'm just getting constant liners and nothing will feed. Then you start a new spot, like maybe 3 meters past with no worms and catch straight away. It's like they won't feed.
So you've got to be careful with them.
Really be careful, yeah.
That's your ability to sort of notice patterns that's doing that for you.
We have to think, obviously, because we've got limited time, we have to think very fast. And obviously, but decisions are massive, and sometimes, obviously, you make the wrong ones.
You've got
Yeah.
a few tricks with worms as well. I'm going to get into your brain a little bit while I've got you sat here.
Yeah, we'll
Like,
listen.
What are your little things with worms? I know you're into things like a little fresh chop and stuff like that. That
Yeah,
really
fresh
help.
chop is obviously. Some people will get to their peg and chop a kilo, and when you first start feeding them, they're great. But when they've been out on your tray for 4 hours,
Yeah, they're not as...
they
yeah.
definitely lose effectiveness. So I tend to chop little and often.
That's exactly what Maker said as well.
Yeah.
Is it
He said-
really? I
yeah,
listened
yeah, he
yet.
said-
Yeah, only it's the last thing that you do, sort of thing. So you're putting it into the swim as freshly chopped
He said
as
not
possible.
after 30 minutes, the amino acids or something start breaking down.
I almost
Something-
wonder whether
or
that's
some
why
enzymes.
worms, they don't like sometimes sitting on them, because obviously they're on the bottom.
They've
doing
been in the
nothing.
swim too long.
And maybe they release something the fish don't like.
Yeah, it's like you only should feed the amount that they're actually
Yes.
going to eat.
Yeah, so
And
if you
not
pile
feed
loads
them.
of worms in when they're not there, the bottom becomes contaminated. with
That
worms.
sounds more like sense to me. I think
Yeah.
that.
So like fresh, but so many venues you can be feeding like old worms. They're not old, but they've been chopped for 3 hours, and then do a fresh chop and it's instant.
Silly question, but how much do you boys chop yours? Are they blitzed?
Depends obviously what I want to achieve. If I want to achieve loads of scent, I'll blitz them.
Yeah.
If I want to only feed maybe small amounts and match what I can put on the hook, then I'll chop
Right,
them what we
okay.
call rough.
Right.
Because what I don't want is getting preoccupied on something I then can't put on the hook.
No, for sure.
Because they are cleverer than underwater shows. They're not as silly as I thought they were.
I know. Have you ever, this is a stupid question that only I could ask. Have you ever tasted different kinds of worms?
Worms taste terrible.
No, funnily enough, I haven't,
No.
Matt. No.
Right.
No, Matt.
Swear to God, because obviously something that another thing, we went to Hungary last year, Lake Decida, where the carp fishing world championships was the year before, and there something that was absolutely lethal. You could plough worms in, try a little impact of worms, dendrobina worms, and not a lot would happen. But it was something that Will Raisin came up with. He started like getting good runs of fish. We were fishing a slider, firing balls of ground bait in. And I could hear him chopping all the time. I'm like, what's he doing? Gone up, seen him. And he's got red worms, which are a totally different kind of worm to a dendrobina. They're a lot less acidic and they're a sweeter tasting
They're a lot
worm.
softer as well.
A lot softer, thinner. they wriggle like mad when you chop them. And he were getting a little blob of red worms, putting them in his ground bait, chopping them in the ground bait, 2 or 3 snips, like chop, chop. So they're all wriggling like mad because all the salt, sounds cruel, doesn't it? All the salt from the ground bait's getting into them. They're wriggling like mad. He's making a ball, firing it in, and obviously that's going down, breaking down. And there's a lot of this going on the bottom.
Yeah, a lot of movement.
Hot country, all the fish are up. It's more movement to bring them down.
Right.
And that were deadly. And I think it were a fact that it weren't acidic, horrible dendras, and there's a lot of movement in the red worms. But if you break a red worm and squeeze it, the juice that's in it is either red or black blood.
How big is a red worm then?
Little, tend to be small.
Yeah.
What
Thinner.
are they just...
They're
what
out
are
of
they?
horse manure.
Oh, right.
They're out of horse poo.
And you're
to get-
tasting this, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
But
sure.
if you taste the red
You're
worm,
licking this, yeah?
honestly, taste a dendrobina and you'll go, that is horrendous. It's like acid.
I've eaten
bitter.
like a big lobworm before.
Yeah, they're sweet though
That
as
was
well.
probably
They're
nothing to do
not.
with fishing, though,
No,
was
it was a bet. Yeah.
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 But you break a red worm and it's blood red and it's a lot sweeter tasting. It's definitely different to feeding dendrobinas.
What, do you use them in your fishing in the UK then as well?
Yeah, but more because collecting a kilo of red worms is virtually impossible.
Well, you can't buy them. though.
No.
I tell you what's good about red worms. You get to go around to stables and have a little look at the stable girl. I've got a few different contacts.
I bet you have.
Yeah.
Like Matt the nonce's back.
Yeah.
You're around.
Hello, can I come and look through your poo pile, please?
Yeah. We get our worms from Willie's Worms, and we always get
That's where I
dendrobinas.
get.
don't
That's
we?
where I
Yeah.
get my dendrous from.
Million
And like,
dendrous. They're really good.
I can't see in your fishing that red worms they're so small.
Yeah, but they might.
They might do, mate.
The only thing would
I-
be movement on the bottom, as in like when you chop them in your ground bait, it's like they're having a disco.
Seeing as you've
Go mad.
tasted all these worms, what about a lobworm? How does that
It's
compare?
not as bitter as a dendra is very, very acidy, bitter, horrible. Lobworms and redworms are more earthy, plain, a little bit sweeter.
So I think the only way I could see red worms for your
Honestly.
fishing would be to chop them in some sort of pellet or ground bait mix, then put them in a little bag, so they broke down around your hook and they were going mad,
Right.
like a little area of movement around your hook bait.
Yeah.
You think it's the movement more than the sweetness then? Or do
Yeah.
you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
So when you're also used, this is I love talking about bait, by the way. So when you've chopped, say in a normal situation, you've chopped your worms, and you obviously believe that the juice is coming out of them
Yeah.
is what they like.
Some people drain the juice off, and I never understand.
Yeah.
Do you ever drain?
No.
Never?
No, I don't understand draining
I think
all
Matt
the
does.
attraction off.
Are you putting a certain type of bait with them though that sucks in the juices that then gets? To
No,
the bottom?
I'll allow for it in my ground bait, if you're not. So like, if you've got a really wet mix of ground bait, I can't then put loads of worms with juice in it because it just turns into a
Slop.
slop. So
Right.
maybe I'll maybe have 2 different consistencies of ground bait.
But you just use the same ground bait that you would normally use.
Yes.
You don't
With
use
less
one
water.
that sucks in the juices a
No,
little bit better.
no,
Right. Okay.
no.
And then another sort of talking point in carp fishing is whether you put the soil out with it, because obviously the soil's going through the worms all of the time, and people say there's loads of amino acids in the soil. But if we spawn the soil out, it doesn't get to the bottom very quickly.
No, it hangs.
Or at all,
Mm.
actually. So if it is true that the attraction's in the soil, then you're putting the soil sometimes
Nowhere near
20
your hook
foot
bait,
above
yeah.
where your hook
So
bait
the
is.
only time we use the soil is for fishing on what we call the mud line, which is only that deep.
Right.
So you
And
know it's
obviously
getting
for
down.
for a cloud.
Yeah.
And then the other time he's fishing up in the water, again for cloud to hang up in the water.
Right.
If I was fishing in like 8 foot of water,
No,
I wouldn't
mud.
be feeding, unless I was making it into a rock hard ball.
Yeah.
I wouldn't feed any soil.
Right,
It's
okay.
purely for fishing either in 10 inches of water
Yeah.
or fishing 10 inches deep in deep water.
Okay.
I've
And you
got-
never use
with
like
you.
a heavy soil or something heavy that takes it to the
Like
bottom.
lean.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
And that
Well,
works, does it?
Can do, but that's a very negative. We don't feed enough worms to like put them in soil and have any attraction. The only,
Right, okay.
Matt's more clued up with soil than I am. But
Or I've never felt like the worm extract or the soil that worms have passed through. I've never felt like it's nutritionally amazing and made any sort of difference, and I've never seen anglers have an amazing run on it.
Okay.
I feel like Steve says a few people tapping it in against a far bank or using it down the edge for a bit of cloud obviously works, throwing it in. I've never felt like fish have come in because there's this
I don't think
amazing
they're
eating
soil
soil.
that
No.
I had
they
an
want to eat
instance
worms.
on a lake a couple of years ago when I was using worm quite a bit. It was just coming into spring, and I found a few big fish up in the water in this little hole in some reeds. and I thought I can get a rig down there. It was about 6 foot deep, and I thought a bit of worm with a bit of cloud is if I can just put it over their heads, it will pull them down. And it did exactly the opposite. That cloud hung, and they just sat up in the water over it. You could just see their gills flaring as they were just tasting it all, but still had no interest in dropping. That was over, down the road, Thurrock Water.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, just sat there, just
almost
gulping it in.
detrimental.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I'm like, brilliant. He wanted to be up there anyway, and now I've given him an excuse to stay up there.
So if you were just using the worms in carp fishing, if you went to go and use it and was fishing a lake where you might get 5 bites in 24 hours or 10 bites in 24 hours, what would you do with the mix?
I'd mix the worms in with something else.
Yeah, so
worms on their own aren't enough for me.
No, so but what quantity mix?
What ratio and what would you put with it?
Ish.
I mean,
like a cup of worms for a bucket? 2 cups of worms
I'd
for a
probably
bucket?
be looking at chopping maybe 500 mil of worms. Of
No clue
chopped
what that is, have you?
worms.
No.
Yeah, so like
500
probably be about
that'd be about 500 mil.
Yeah,
yeah,
So,
probably
yeah.
be about, I don't know, 2/3 of a kilo, I'd say. 500 mil. 2/3 of a kilo of worms chopped.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I'd chop them fine for your fishing, to be honest with you. And I'd put it with something like some micro pellets, a few 4 mils, a few casters or a bit of crushed boilie in there.
Yeah.
That'd be probably my approach, but not a clue what you boys generally do.
No, that is pretty much what I've done when I've used them.
How many kilo though if you're going for 24 hours, and worms are the in bait, how many kilo could you feed? Or would you not feed a kilo?
Again, I think it's venue dependent as well. I've got a lake I've done a couple of guests on recently that I'll put an opening hit of bait out that'll include a bit of pellet, a bit of corn, boilie, and probably half a kilo of worm. I'll put that out. Normally, within an hour, I've had a bite. I've got a separate mix that I top up with, because once I've cut the worm, I want that all out straight away, like we were saying about
I want it
not
fresh.
leaving it
Yeah.
exactly. Top up with other bait, and I can string out probably 2 or 3 bites, maybe 4 bites off that initial hit of bait, and topping up with 5 spods after every fish.
5 spots after each fish.
But then you get to the point, I'll then go 45 minutes to an hour without a bite, and it needs that spark from the worm again. I'll put that same hit out again and start catching straight away. It's like once they've...
It's similar to what they said.
Same principle,
once it's...
Impact.
Yeah, exactly.
But we would take a lot of worm with us just in case it goes off and you need a lot of them. Like I always take a lot of my van's always full of different baits because I feel like that is probably the most important thing.
What do you class as a lot, Tom?
Well, say I was going for a night, I would at least take 5 key of boilie, like at the minute I'm taking 5 key of 10 mil boilies. I've always got 6 big tins of corn in the back of the van. And recently I've been using these little tiny micro pellets as well.
A lot of high oil or?
To be honest, I don't know.
The ones you got from Norton.
They are.
They've switched over now. They tend to like a more low oil one in the winter, and now as it gets warm, they're
quite dark. They probably are quite high oil,
They
and I don't
are.
know how much difference they make. They just sort of look quite nice in the mix. I thought they'd be,
Do you think as well, like because they're so small, they hold the fish for longer?
I don't put enough out for that to happen.
Right.
I don't think. I always try and feed the biggest particles I possibly can, so it makes them easier to catch.
Because they're used to picking up something big.
Yeah, like I want them aiming to pick up one bait and moving and actually picking up a bait. We've literally just proved it on the underwater.
Yeah,
that
you
it
don't want
works.
them hoovered to the bottom, sucking up the tiniest grains for hours.
No, if you've got a small spot with lots of small items on it, they're very difficult to catch, especially on something as blatant as a pop-up. I want to be able to use a pop-up so it's presented all of the time, and I want lots of big items of food out there so they're willing to eat the pop-up. That's like the key to the whole sort of thing. And then once you get that situation going where they're eating lots of big particles spread over a relatively large area, you just catch everything that picks up the hook bait.
Do you think they're easier to catch them when they're eating on the move, like 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4,
100%.
rather than like Hoover barely moving?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. We had 4 bites on the underwater between us, and we was using pop-ups. In fact, you was using a bright wafter. He was using.
Yeah.
But we literally, because we were spreading over a bigger area. Are we meant to be saying all this?
Yeah,
it's
I was
fine.
just
It's
thinking
fine.
that.
It's fine. That's fine. They come down. You barely see a carp in the small spot that we're filming because they're eating elsewhere. But when you see one, it just comes. It just picks up the hook bait.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, got him.
There's still plenty of bait around. There's other stuff there.
But everything about the pickup is it's going to get hooked. It's sucked it in
Exactly.
confidently. It's moving on, so the hook's going in.
You want it going for your bait. Like if it's aiming for your bait and it's taking it confidently, you're getting him. Like 100%.
There's a lot of principles the same there. Like the preoccupied nature of fish on small particles in our fishing can be a nightmare. So many situations you hear anglers come off the bank in matches and go, I've had a million indications, I've foul upped them, my peg were fizzing. They were absolute devils to catch.
Yeah, and they are preoccupied on the tiny bits
That's
that
happening
you
in
fed.
our fishing, isn't
Yeah,
it?
happens all the time.
100%,
Because we're
yeah.
obviously, we tend to fish like 2 mil pellets.
Yeah,
Like cover the bottom in them.
Sometimes on the hook, certain
yeah. See,
individuals.
that's so difficult. I think that you're making it difficult for yourself. What? Yeah, I remember a session years ago. I fished a club lake in Lee Valley, and I was using it was actually Penning at the time that was using them. I think over maybe years ago, and we were getting salty peanuts and blitzing them into like not into like a milkshake, but into really small particles. You put them out, they go mad from you.
Straight out the supermarket.
No. Like I don't know. We just like peanuts, and we boil them.
Bird feed.
Like bird feed.
Oh,
You know, like
yeah.
Not like salted peanuts.
Right. Okay.
You could use them as hook baits, but we're blitzing them up into like really small particles, probably like 2 or 3 mil, and then spodding them out. And they really loved them, but you just couldn't get a bite over them. It was almost impossible. You just get liners all night, where they're eating it all, and then just end up leaving your hook baits because they're too big. So you could probably fish really fine down, but it's not the way you fish for carp, is it? So you definitely can feed too small a bait, I'm sure.
We get a lot of that, don't we?
Yeah.
A lot of it. Things like joker can often cause it. Too much joker in your peg, little tiny worms, micro pellets. We do some fishing in winter for skimmers and bream on commercials, and there's millions of fish in these places. And the way that sort of, I'm sure certain anglers have been doing it for a long time, you probably included, but it's sort of come to light the last couple of years. They call it tippy tapping pellets in, and they'll have a little pot on the end of the pole. Massive lake, like, Meadowlands is a huge open water lake, 12 foot deep, and they'll ship out and they'll literally tap out of a tiny pole pot sort of 12 or 15 2 mil pellets into this abyss of water with a 3 mil pellet on the hook, and you can catch skimmers pretty much every single chuck. And you start upping it or get a little bit giddy or excited with the bait,
You ruin it.
and 20-25 pellets in, and your peg goes to pieces. They're still there. You get loads of indications and foul hook them and hook them round the mouth, and you have to rein it back again, and you constantly
isn't it?
manage.
Wow.
But the threshold of how much of these small baits. But before, people used to have a pole pot and some 2 mil pellets, and the habit was, I fill my pole pot up with pellets, tap it in, and they'd catch a few, and the peg had just go to pieces. But people like Jamie Hughes, and you used to do it at Tunnel years ago, didn't you? Like
Tunnel
2
was-
or 3 pellets.
Everyone
and-
used to think the fish spooked off the spot, but what happens is you build up too much bait.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
'cause the first time I ever went to Tunnel, I'd never been there before, and the guy said to me, you need to tap in 6 micros, so 6 2 mil pellets.
Yeah.
But I was a bit rough, and so I've gone there, I've put some pellets, looks about 6. And after about an hour, I was really struggling, and I bumped my pole, and all the pellets shot out the pot. And the water was really clear, and I watched them sinking. There was about 150.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was just picking them up, throwing them in the pot, and literally.
6 though.
So I started
6
again,
2 mil
plumbed a new
pellets.
spot, tapped it, virtually counted them in 6, and caught a fish chuck.
See, they're all of the things that make a massive difference. That unless you actually done them, you wouldn't. You'd go, that doesn't make
rubbish.
any sense.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
a load of rubbish. And that's how people like. I know Tom Maker's podcast has just gone out. This is like the art of spot building. I think is something that's probably not talked about enough.
Yeah.
And that is because it's so like fishing's such a like the results are so compounding. If you get something right and you get that thing right 10 times on the trot, you end up with 100 times more carp than everyone else, or 100 times more fish than everyone else. And people that are watching you think you're doing exactly the same as them almost, but you're not. You're getting the small things right, and they're the things that make a massive, 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 massive difference.
Totally agree. I always say that the most amazing thing about the best anglers, and I'm sure this applies to carp fishing as well, is you could sit next to them. They've got the same buzzers, rod, spom, spod, line, hook baits, feed baits, and everything. but the way they go about it and the things that they're doing that you can't see when you sat next to them are the ones that make the biggest difference, definitely.
And it makes somebody look like they're cheating and somebody look like they don't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
That's the difference in building that spot, for sure.
Agree.
Yeah.
But it's not only building it, it's then controlling the spot.
Yeah.
Because you can blow the spot as quick as you got it going. You can get giddy and
kill it
blow it. Yeah. A lot of time I call it, you almost got to starve them on. If you give them too much choice, you got to feed just enough to catch one.
Yeah.
Because obviously we've got more fish. When we catch one, another one replaces it.
Yeah.
Which is different for you because you might only have 10 in the whole lake.
Yeah.
But like
a lot of the time we're not fishing lakes like that.
Yeah.
Though. But yeah, I know. I get
like,
the
so
point.
we have to almost. I call it like fishing for one at a time. But there's always enough fish in our venues
to keep having lots of one at a
yes,
time.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one a cast in effect. But if you feed for, I know you can't catch 2 a cast. But if you feed for like 2 or 3 a cast, you can make that one uncatchable.
Yeah.
I've got a funny story for you, right? My dad's just started match fishing again, and it's hilarious listening to him about it, right? And he's got this little lake on his caravan site. You'll like this. And he's like, what should I do? And I says, well, I'll jump to come with you. He went, no, let me go. I'll have a few matches so I know what's going on, and then we'll go and have a day. So I says, but just give me an outline. And I'm like, you can't beat, just tap some pellets in, set a little trap, catch one at a time. And he was like, what do you mean tap some pellets in? Bear in mind, he hadn't match fished properly on a commercial for ever. So I says, you know your pole pot, meaning little pole pot, little guru pole pot that we put like 15 pellets in. Get one of them, fill it up with 6mm pellets. I said, this is where I went wrong. I went, get your pole pot, fill it
He's
up.
got one about this big.
Fill it up with 6mm pellets, pot them in, and put your rig right on top of it. And when you've caught one, just do it again. Exactly what you've just explained. So he's rang me. Missing some bites, I get off to a great start. He says, and then I just keep hooking them and they swim off because they foul up, and I come back with a scale and I've had my elastic pulled out, I've broke a top kit, and I'm like, what are you feeding? He says, exactly like you said. I put a pot of pellets in, go in on top, catch one. He says, I normally get one straight away. Fine. Put another pot of pellets in. He says, it's blowing. I can see them. There's loads in my peg. I'm like, how many pellets are you feeding? He's like, literally one full pot after each fish. He says, I'm getting through some pellets, though. He says, I had to buy 3 bags off Neil last week. I says, how are you getting through that many? He went, I'm just filling that pot up. I says, how big's your pot, Dad? And he sent me a picture, and it's a 300ml Old Preston pot. And I didn't realise what he were doing.
Yeah.
But it were hilarious.
You get it massively wrong.
Yeah.
You have to be more specific next time.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Sorry, can I just ask one more question on the bait? I think that bait is best used almost on it. Like if you recognise what bait they want and then almost feed that bait on its own, I feel like I get the best results. So say in the summer, in August, I think they love tiger nuts. So I would just put tiger nuts out. If I mix that with something else that they don't like, I feel like you catch less. Because even though if somebody didn't realise it in August that they like tiger nuts, they'd probably put out like a buffet of bait, like lots of different types, and that there will be something in there that they like, so they'll catch some fish. But if you're able to single out the exact thing they want and feed that only, then I definitely get more fish. Do you do the same in match fishing as well, or do you always mix your bait?
Tend to mix a lot, I'd say.
Yeah, but I think that this is somewhere we can learn from you boys, because I think that sometimes we have a lot of bait in our peg that they're probably not picking up. You're a big fan of mixing bait. I know you are.
Yeah, like if I'm fishing in the margins, I'll have like casters, corn, hemp, dead maggots. Or I call it a Bombay mix and like give them so much choice it confuses them.
But see, I don't.
But I agree on casters. I think casters are an amazing edge bait because they crunch. I think they love crunching on the casters.
So when they're into that, would you just put them out alone?
No, I like to give them. In my head,
still doing
in my head, like when I'm fishing the edge, I feel like lots of different types of bait because when they come in the edge, we've got numbers of fish coming in,
right?
So they're very aggressive. And I feel like I get more bites because they're like, you don't know what to eat next. There's a maggot, a caster, a bit of hemp, corn. So and because they're competing, and I think the competition element is massive for us.
Yeah.
You probably only got one. We might have 20 like 8-pound carp in the edge.
Have you noticed on your underwater footage? Have you noticed fish picking out certain baits with regularity, or are you feeding a mix and they are just eating everything?
Yeah, they were obviously look at underwater too, which obviously bream.
Yeah, we watched it.
It blew my mind because I go to Frey Meadows is one of the venues I fish the most, and I just turned up, put 3 or 4 maggots on the hook, thinking big bait, target. But it's obviously Underwater 2 showed that those bream become accustomed to picking up singles.
Yeah.
Like I fished a match last week and caught a couple of my bream on single maggot. I'd never even put a single maggot on before Underwater 2.
Are you dulling that down because you won the match with like 130?
No, I didn't win this. I was second on this, the one I'm talking about.
Right.
But it showed me, like, I know you'll say they're not, but bream are quite clever.
They're just sifting through silt trying to survive.
Let's move on.
But it made me think about like single baits, how those bream at Frey Meadows get fished for a lot.
Yeah.
So like 3 maggots isn't natural together on a hook.
Yeah.
A single one is, and Underwater 2 showed they were quite happy. They were much happier picking up the singles because they regard that as normal.
Yeah.
Whereas I used to think, get some bream in the swim or carp, put 5 maggots on, big bait. They're going to really home in on that.
Yeah.
I fish 22 as a hook bait when I'm fishing maggot.
Yeah. Yeah. But like
22 maggots.
Yeah, on a
but
bit
I'm
of
not
cork,
convinced
like a big
anymore they
ball.
do home in on target
No.
baits, thinking, why eat one when I can eat 10 in one mouthful?
Yeah,
I think they do in the spring. I think they'll home in on one bait in the spring that's more obvious, but in the summer you probably have to go down to what they've been eating most of the year.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Because like some of the best method feeder anglers I know, like when method was in its heyday, they used to fish like single maggot on the hook, like on a small hook, and they used to catch loads.
Yeah.
And obviously our fishing's now gone down a route of like high vis hook baits, bit behind obviously you guys, but like makes them really blatant and they'll just suck it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
But
target almost.
Yes, yeah. Whereas I'm not sure that's always the right way of fishing. Sometimes a little tiny hook bait will catch you those fish that won't suck up like a fluorescent pink wafter, for instance.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to go back to the bait thing. So like, you know, when you're saying in sort of October time that they really love meat, even though you know that they love meat in October and the matches are being won on them, you're still putting out meat, casters, pellet?
No.
You're just putting meat out.
Yeah. Sometimes meat and hemp, only because I used to put when I used to do it a lot, I used to find to keep them on the deck. Sometimes a better hemp was good, but then I wouldn't feed meat and hemp together.
You'd have a better hemp
I'd maybe pot 3 big pots of hemp it.
Yeah.
And then throw meat over the top.
Right.
And then sometimes the carp used to start coming off bottom.
Right.
So then I started foul looking them, then you put another.
But that's because they like it so much.
Yeah, it is. But I'm trying to force them back down to where I want them.
But that's like that's a technical problem, isn't it? It's not actually the idea that you're putting the hemp out because it's helping. It's getting them eating more.
The hemp was always a really good settler. It's like if I started foul looking because they come off bottom, you could put a big pot of hemp in and like basically maybe leave it for 5 minutes, still throw and go back to throwing the meat, and it's like they've gone back down.
Right, but if you take away the problem of them going up in the water because they're eating the meat so much, you'd happily you'd prefer to just fish meat.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's too many signs now you've said it in our fishing, and I'm sat here thinking it, where fishing the right bait and only that bait is deadly. Pellets.
It is,
pellets.
man, I'm telling you.
See, pellets,
I'm sure of it.
Pellets, if I was fishing like open water pole fishing, just feed 6 mil hard pellets, nothing else.
Or micro pellets in winter.
Don't give them another choice.
No, because they don't want it as much.
No.
Yeah.
Other lethal baits, bloodworm and joker. You like when you're feeding joker, 90% of the time, bloodworm or joker on the hook is by far the best because that's the bait they want to eat. Meat, a bait they want to eat at certain times of year. Feed it. I know Steve puts his hemp down to pin him down a little bit, but you'd never put a piece of hemp on the hook.
No.
But meat and just meat on its own, you're not feeding pellets with it and corn with it and everything else with it. Another example, different kind of fishing altogether, really dominant bait on natural venues, hemp seed for roach.
Yep.
Once they are eating hemp seed,
They won't eat anything else.
you could you could be getting one every single chuck within seconds of it going in on a piece of hemp, put a maggot on, won't get a bite.
Yeah, it's weird.
Like, and the nail on the head from you in this conversation, I think, is when you know they're on that, only giving them that to eat and only putting that on the hook is really important.
Really, really important. If I look back at all of my very best trips, it's when I'm driving to the lake going, I know what bait they want, and I've just got a big bucket of that bait. Definitely.
So I think
how many good trips have you had on just sweet corn?
Well, mate, this conversation's made me think about something. I'm going to a venue this weekend. I've only just told you about it. Going to Burners. I used to fish it a lot, And this time of year, in the spring, I remember feeding carp in the edge, a little mix, and they were coming in and picking out the sweet corn every time. So I converted that into my normal fishing, just spotted out corn, had a great trip. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm going to go to Berners. I know they really like the worm now, so I'm going to take a bit of worm, I'm going to take a bit of corn, I'm going to put some boilie crumb in to help it all. I'm not. I am just going to take sweet corn. I'm going to, 100%.
Just try it. And it's the same. Like when Dan first took over Gigantica and cell was going in, just boilie, they were so switched onto that cell. It's like it's almost not worth putting anything else on.
Yeah.
There's no point because you know every single time they're swimming past one, if they're hungry, they're going to eat it. So you might as well just have that on.
Before dark, 4 kilo out with the throwing stick.
Yeah, sit there for half hour with the throwing stick, get 3 kilos out or whatever, and then catch loads of fish at night.
So you think in that situation, the fish are conditioned?
Yeah, in that
sell,
situation, that used to be it's sort of going back to like them being bored of something and them seeing something new in a new feeding situation. That was a particle water for years and years. Dan took it over.
Yeah, fish full with bait boats, don't forget as well.
Yeah, with bait boats and proper boats, So then they were being converted onto these little packages of bait that were really good for them and really easy to eat, spread over a big area, and they're just mopping them up all the time.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what bait it is, it just seems when they are switched onto that bait, it's like, just give them that and don't give them anything else. The hardest thing to find out is what bait that is. Like for a casual angler, certainly, like going fishing in the summer or whenever, and then trying to pick out that perfect bait without all of the past experience is very difficult to do, I think.
That's why I feel like sometimes as a match angler, if I don't quite know, I feed 2 baits.
Yeah.
To try and work out which one they want to eat. So
but you're hedging, you're hedging, but you're also.
But after 2 hours, I'm hopeful that I'll know.
Yeah, you look. Yeah.
Like sometimes I used to feed meat and pellets together a lot because I wasn't quite sure which one was going to be right. But normally after like an hour, 2 hours, I'm like, they're not really eating pellets.
So you just feed meat?
Yeah.
Okay, so
but at the start, give them both to make sure I'm covered.
Yeah, I think it's something that loads of people get wrong all of the time is putting too much mix in because it feels. I sway back towards doing it as well because I think I don't really know what they're into. Like if we go to Norton, we don't really know what they're into, so you put a bit of pellet out.
You're hedging again, aren't you?
You're hedging because it like
There's something that they want
over the course of the year. By hedging, you probably do better anyway, but. Actually, if you're fishing all of the time, you've got lots of past experience, and if every single time you went fishing, you could use only the bait that they love, you would catch 10 times more than everyone else. It's just being able to get that right in the first place. That's the hardest thing. Because I'm trying to write out a table of what times of year I think best baits are, and if that one doesn't work, what the second best one probably is. And I think if you could end up looking at that, going right, okay, it's whatever August, I'm going to try that first, that second, that third, you'll eventually bump into the one that's working and you'll just catch loads more.
Because I always say, when somebody asks me what the best bait is, if you don't know, pellets aren't always the best, but they're the safest. So that in our fishing on a commercial, pellets will never be wrong, but meat might outfish them at a certain time. Worms might outfish them. But if you're in total doubt as in haven't got a clue,
pellets your base layer.
Pellets is always your starting point because it'll never not produce bites. But if someone next to you is fishing worms and they're right, he'll blitz you.
Yeah.
But obviously that's a starting point. It's a really safe. Sometimes in match fishing you have to start safe.
Yep.
And then you might have to gamble
a bit
halfway
more aggressive,
through. Yes.
Yeah.
But like if you didn't know, like meat can be the most amazing bait ever. But for me, only depending on the weather, April. And then September, November, October, around that time. Right. If I throw it in July, and a great indicator of when a bait's wrong for us is silvers. If I'm fishing a commercial full of carp and I'm throwing meat in for maybe 2 hours, drop on my meat line and my first fish are a skimmer and a roach.
Carp ain't there.
Carp aren't coming to meat.
Right.
So I'll switch it straight away to pellets.
Yeah.
Because they sometimes you can let the other species tell you that the bait's wrong, because if the carp were there, the roach wouldn't be boiling on the surface for the meat.
That makes sense. What we were seeing on underwater, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Recently.
Yeah.
You know, shoals and shoals of roach on the spot, pecking away especially at the corn, but pecking away. All of a sudden, you just see him spook, and one or two things would happen: either a bird had dived, or just a carp would come through. So that does make sense.
And actually, they were eating the sweet corn when the carp weren't really eating the sweet corn.
Yeah.
The carp were eating the boilies, weren't they?
Definitely.
So it's like,
very interesting.
It is very
interesting.
I can feel a joint underwater coming in.
Oh, yeah.
No, like that. Look, 3 lovely carp rigs and then hybrid feeder, pole rig on top, Matt's Waggler coming down.
Yeah, I think it would be good for us to come on them. Even just the thoughts.
Yeah,
It's not even necessarily the
process.
rigs. It's I think it's the thought process on bait and how much is such an important part of fishing. People overlook. Yeah, shame. Well, how do you feel? It's different for us giving away what we do because we're not in direct competition with people. Do you sit here thinking, I don't want to say something because you're literally going to sit next to somebody that's been listening to you the weekend
exactly
on the podcast
the same.
that could then
It's
beat
like
you at your own game.
Like, obviously, I'll say it, but I'm not going to tell you. But I've got like rigs for my hybrid feeder fishing
right
that I've never shown anyone.
Well, what are they then?
Anyone? You've never shown anyone?
No.
You have different. When I come out filming with you,
I fish with different rigs when we film.
You've got this hook box. This is your filming hook box, isn't it?
Pardon?
Yeah. Where's your other hook box?
Hidden.
Even when I come,
But mainly for like places like Boddington in the winter where you're only going to get, which is a bit more similar.
Yeah, I've spoken to Matt
I'm
quite
only
a bit.
fishing for like 1 to 4 bites in 5 hours.
Right.
I should know that's probably a lot of bites for you guys.
Yeah.
But I can't afford a fish to get away with it.
Yeah.
So like I feel like the way I've modified my rigs.
So do you think you got a rig that's 1 for 1 then?
Not 1 for 1. No, I'm not claiming that.
Sounded like you were.
But I feel
That's what you were saying there, Steve.
I feel I've got rigs that are more effective than maybe other people's.
Right.
But obviously, everyone needs. In my fishing, I need an edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I
exactly.
get
That's
that.
what I'm saying. But it's like but mainly the things that are important, which we're talking about, you're happy to share with people, which is amazing.
Yeah, but I'd also say for match angling, the standards risen because there's so many great videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
So much information in the media. People have got better and better. So like, I feel I've lost a lot of edges in the last 10 years.
Well, you've given them away.
Yeah,
Haven't you?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but equally, like, so certain things, I'm not saying I never hold back other than my hook lengths.
Yeah.
But like, it's now the draw becomes even more important than ever. It's like I'll take like the standards got better. When I first went to Whiteacres, there was a lot of fishing tight to islands.
Yeah.
And there was probably only like 180 people fishing over the week. Maybe 10 blokes you could get it like within 2 inches of the island
Every
single
cast.
shot.
Yeah.
Now you go and there's 160, 170 blokes can do
Yeah.
it. So you've lost your edge because everyone's got better at casting.
Yeah.
And it's even like distance. I used to be like, I can still cut, not compared to you boys, but for like a match angler, I can cast further. But people have now gone out, practiced it, had lessons with people like Terry,
Yeah.
Matt Hutchinson, and loads of people are now fishing over 100. So there's another edge gone.
Yeah.
And
But
like,
nobody can get that feel that you've got on that experience, though. It's like that.
No,
it's your decision making, isn't it? That's the most
most
important thing.
yeah, it's like when you fish at long range, and you'll probably know this. I can tell like my feeder has to go in right. So sometimes I'll have obviously 5 casts, and people will be like, "What's he doing?" But that feeder has to go in with a certain noise. I have to be able to
So you
watch
know
it go.
it's-
So I know
yeah.
I'm fishing, because I know it's not a long time for you, but if I'm going to leave it for 45 minutes, it has to be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't chuck it and think it landed slightly side on or a little bit heavy.
Yeah.
Or I didn't quite hit the clip as hard as I want. If I'm going to leave it, because I put it down 2 minutes later, I'm like, I don't like this.
Yeah, you've got to
I'm gonna
redo
have
it anyway.
We're exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
the timescales are different, but
you watch a lot of people and they whack it out, and sometimes it goes in on the diagonal.
Yeah, it lands like a bag of spanners.
and
They put the rod
sometimes
down.
and sometimes they catch.
That's an ongoing joke with us. If I hit the clip and I'm happy and I'm putting it down, he'll go, "You leaving that?"
Yeah.
sounded horrible.
But there is like you've got a sixth sense. I can sort of tell what the right noise is, the right impact. I'm like, that's fishing. That's all going to hit the deck intact.
Yeah.
And I can sit there now for my 45 minutes knowing that if one comes along, everything's sitting perfectly.
Yeah, that comes into it even more with carp fishing because we are leaving them for a long period of time. It's not even about not catching; it's like you don't want to waste your actual time just sitting there with nothing out there.
And
so
it's the same
every time we cast out. It's like we have to make sure it's right. Whereas if we're somewhere like we were at Norwood at the weekend, because I'm getting bites really quickly, there was a couple of times where it didn't quite go in right, and I thought I'll give it half hour, an hour, and we'll see if it goes or not. Sometimes it was going, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But we were having this exact conversation. It's weird.
It's the same with like casting up to islands, and I know obviously watching the videos, you look for that sort of donk. Sometimes I'll chuck to an island and you get a bit of a soft, what I call like a soft landing.
Yeah.
You're like, that's sitting on top of something. So I can't then put that down. And sometimes you reel in and you think, well, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
But
It doesn't
has,
matter.
No, but it has to be.
Yeah.
I need to feel that bang,
Yeah.
and like that's landed on something.
Yeah.
Or it's not stuck on a bit of twig.
Yeah.
Except even if I'm only leaving it for in match fishing, I can't waste 3 minutes.
No.
What's the longest you boys, just to give people listening a bit of a timescale, what's the longest you've ever left a rod in the water and caught a fish? having it being in there?
Not say 2 days, yeah.
Yeah, I've been freaked out for 2 days. I'm trying to think. I've had a bite after 2 days on any of our trips.
Probably
over 24 hours.
Definitely over 24 hours.
Definitely.
Do you find some waters, the longer it's in the water, better chance?
I'm not convinced about that. I think no.
We're having this conversation recently because Adam Reed from Carp Porter, he's now got it in his head that he likes leaving them for a long time. He's at least one of his rods when he's putting it out, that's staying there for the duration of the trip if it doesn't go.
I'm not having that.
I can't.
I think if you leave anything, it gets worse. Just in
Yeah,
general,
tell
no
you
matter what it is. If you just leave it, it's getting worse.
Why do you think?
What about tiger nuts?
Or if you leave them for a certain period of time, they're good.
Right.
But that's like a fermentation sort of thing. But that's not.
I time all my bites, yeah. Like, let's go back to Boddington in the winter where you're not fishing for many.
Yep.
And there's nearly always a pattern. So, like, if it's hard, the best, it's normally 25 to 30 minutes for your bite. And, like, you could catch 10 fish in a day, and 9 of them would be in that window.
Yeah.
But, like, why do you think, have you got any theory why that would be? Because there nearly always is a pattern.
Yeah,
like
but that's not long though, is it? 25 minutes.
It is for a match angler.
Yeah,
really
It's an incredible. Like the longest bite, I've had an hour and a 1 hour 20 at Boddington because I was talking to someone and no one caught anything, and it went
wrapped round.
Yeah, but there's definitely at Boddington, yeah, because the fish spook a lot.
That's what I was going to say.
There's definitely
it's them going away then coming back.
Yes,
going away from the splash.
But it's amazing.
Down.
It always amazes me how it's like. Sometimes I've stood there and gone, in the next 2 minutes that's going to go.
Yeah.
And then it goes, and you're like, you can set your watch by how long it takes.
That must
to come
be
back.
them spooking away, then gaining confidence and coming back. It
Yeah.
must be. I think with carp fishing, I think the longer you leave it out there, the more chances you have of something going wrong in that period. Like all of your bait being eaten and it being left out there, or the hook being moved by a small fish and it blunting. It's like I think you up your chances if you just make sure that at least. Say there's a 24-hour period and you recast 4 times in that period. What's that? 6 hours each, isn't it? At least 1 or 2 of them 6-hour periods you're going to be sitting right, and you're going to have a chance of catching one. If you put it out and it's not good from the beginning, then you've lost that whole 24 hours, haven't you? So you're definitely upping your chances of it being sitting right if you do it more often than not, I think.
Do you sit there thinking, obviously, in your bivvy, wonder if that hook stuck on a twig? Or,
the moment we think that, we change it.
Right.
That's one of the rules we live by.
Yeah.
if you think something's not right there, redo it.
And obviously, if you chuck and like you think, "Cool, didn't like that landing,"
No.
Redo it straight
just
away.
Yeah.
It doesn't go on the rest.
No.
Because like you said, you might leave it for 3 minutes. You sit down, or in our case, put the kettle on, have a cup of tea, and think, I weren't happy with it then. Why on earth have I left it now? And you have to redo it.
Once it's in your head, it's
dangerous.
Yeah, sometimes I had it the weekend as well. Sometimes even out when they go out right, and I think I ain't getting a bite with them. Yeah, I don't know what. And then we sit there for like 2 hours and they're not right, and I've redone them all, and they just went straight away. And it's like they went out lovely as well, but you sort of get a bit of a sense sometimes that something's not right, or something hasn't quite been exactly what you want it to be.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask about when you fish Boddington. Are you only ever just fishing a single feeder out there? Do you ever, like we would, spot a bit of bait out and try to create?
At Boddington, one of the most important parts is, obviously, you've got unlimited open water. You've probably got 300 metres in front of you, which is, obviously, even you two can't cast that. So it's all about starting at the right distance and then moving with the fish. So you have to make every...
Right.
And they spook. They definitely spook. So if you...
Do you think they'd spook less if you created a feeding situation? No.
They don't really come to bait as such. They basically you just want a high attract pile of bait with a hook bait in it.
Right. Okay.
Like if you have, a lot of people go there and they spot a load of bait. Well, not spot, but big feed, bait up feeder, 60 meters, put a load of pellets, corn in it. But the fish get pushed out. They're not really feeding. The water's quite clear. So like normally, if you have a great day at Boddington, you'll start at 70 and finish at 95.
Right.
Basically, you just follow them out. They never come in.
Right.
Okay.
So they never, and if you keep chucking in the same spot, I've tried it a few times. I'll build a peg.
Yeah.
But they don't. You catch a couple, and then it's like they're
backing off it anyway.
Constantly backing away.
Do you in them situations, are you hitting the clip in a way that makes it really quiet for your?
I tried to get it go with a lovely little plop.
Yeah, but are you using stretchy line for that, or using braid?
Using obviously braid's banned, so we have to use mono.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
But like that, you've got to. It's like some people say to me, "Oh, I fished at 130 meters," but then I watch them and think, I would never have left the feeder ever, how that's gone in.
Yeah.
Because to me, to fish effectively at 130, I've virtually got to smash the clip off the reel.
Yeah.
To get everything straight.
Yeah, you have.
And get my feed, like just hitting the clip at like over 100.
Yeah, it's not enough.
Isn't enough to get, because bear in mind, my pellets are moulded around the feeder. They're not in a bag.
Yeah.
So I can't go, if I don't hit the clip hard, that's not go.
Off.
I've probably lost the whole lot. And then I've got a hook bait on an empty feeder with a load of pellets all over the place.
I'm having a bit of a thing at the minute because I've changed to like flat, like just using flat line, like thicker line, but not a leader or anything. And because it's such low stretch, certainly at the beginning of the trip, when I'm hitting the clip, it's not hitting the clip nice because it's like, I'm sure it's like, it would be the same if you're wearing braid. Yeah. If you're wearing braid, if you're using braid, it's like, it's not stretching on the clip and then hitting the surface really straight and nice. It's just bouncing slightly. And it's so much harder to get them right when it's like that. So
you can hit the clip too hard, and then if you can't cushion it, it almost bounces and comes back on itself, and then it doesn't land right either.
Yeah. The nicest way is when we're using like tapered line. So most of your line is much thinner. So you've got like 033 line on or whatever. And over a period of time, so fishing at Gigantic, you're there a week, the line takes on a little bit of water. You've got thin line on, and every time you hit the clip, you can cast it probably 5 or 10 yards further than the clip is, and it's all straightening out nice, and you can hear it differently when it hits the surface, and that's when you start catching loads because you're really accurate out there. I think.
Because I believe you can hit the clip like 5 times, but with 5 different amount of pressures, and be
fishing
like,
5 different spots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like obviously underwater shows it because you, particularly if you're fishing at like a decent range, I'd imagine you could hit the clip but not even appear on camera.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously in a lot of people would be like, I've hit the clip.
That'll
I'm obviously fishing on my bait.
Yeah. You need like a little bit of stretch, I think, is not too much so it can stretch past your spot, but enough that you can cast 5 yards past your spot. It's straightening out, and on the way down, it's righting itself. Anything lower than that, it's just like it's bouncing all of the time. You have to hit it perfect. Then you end up casting more and then not getting out as quick. It's like you want
more disturbance, backing off even more.
Yeah.
It's like a downward spiral if you start getting it wrong, innit?
Yeah.
There's situations where you sometimes have a bit of a fake cast on purpose, isn't there?
Yeah, sometimes like if nothing's happening, I'll do like what we call it like a fake cast. So you'll chuck in, basically emptying one on the surface, just to create a bit of a column, so they see a bit of bait falling, if you know what I mean. And then just chuck straight back on top of it.
What do you mean, not hitting the clip?
No, you hit the clip, but like
slightly looser mix.
Slightly looser mix around the method, and maybe try not to hit it as well. It's hard to cast badly. No, it sounds daft, but like.
You spend some time, isn't it?
But no, just try and knock all your bait off on the surface, particularly when the water's clear in winter.
Yeah.
Sometimes just knocking a bit of bait off on the surface and then chucking. It's like the fish are off deck because obviously you catch loads of carp on zigs in winter and stuff.
Yep.
But like a lot of the waters we fish go a bit clear in winter. If you can knock, sometimes you can have no bites for like 3 hours. Chuck one out, empty it on the surface, chuck on top, and then 5 minutes later you've got one. And I don't think that's coincidence. But that trick will only work like once, so it's not like you can keep repeating it on the same spot. It's a one fish trick.
Do you treat everything like it's a non-coincidence? Like if you make a change and something works, then do you not allow yourself to go, it might have been a coincidence, or do you just always go, right, I've made a change, it's worked, I'm going to stick with that?
Sometimes I think it can be, but then once you've repeated that trick like other days, you're like, that's not coincidence. It's like obviously going off a bit tangents like goo. I've had it a couple of days. For me, in winter, goo is brilliant as an impact. If you use it every chuck, it loses its effectiveness.
Right.
But I've been on like venues where it's absolutely dire, no one can get a bite, and after 3 hours, I've gooed up a feeder, chucked it, caught one first chuck.
Yeah.
I remember you and Rooney doing it with the coconut goo.
Yeah, and
putting it in your method mix.
Yeah,
I never forgot that.
And I've never caught another one all day. But obviously you keep trying the goo. When you catch one first, you're like, bloody hell, I just need to put goo on. I'll have one every single chuck. But it works once. That's it. It's an impact for that. Maybe there was one fish in the area, it saw the goo, came in. But if you put it on every chuck from the start, in summer it's different. Sometimes putting it on every chuck from the start, get a bit of a scent cloud, and they'll home in on it and stay on it. But in winter, the amount of times I've been blanketing and then chuck goo and caught one, like when no one else has caught a fish, but you can't repeat it.
That's strange.
It's a one cast trick.
You need to try some different flavours, I reckon.
Yeah, possibly.
Can I ask you something about this, right? Do you think, because obviously this impact thing with goo, etc., and I see it used in match fishing a lot, more so recently, we have feeder-only matches. So red hot spring day, all the fish are swimming about on the surface. Goo's often very good then, but I don't think it's because, I'm sure I'm allowed to say this, I don't think it's because they love the taste and smell of pineapple goo. I think it's because when you put the goo on your feeder on our venues, it hits the water, a load of goo comes off on the surface, and then you get a bit of a sinking trail down, so the fish that are up in the water
Could
come
get pulled
into...
down by it.
What's
It's a
this? This is
column.
nice, and it makes them tip up and go down where there's a feeder and a hook bait. Do you think that sometimes they love a certain flavour or certain smell, or do you think it's because of what the additive, in this situation goo, is actually doing mechanically in the water or chemically in the water? Or a bit of both?
Yeah, I definitely have I've used the goo since it came out, and I'm one of the first to play around with new samples before they're coming out, and there are always a few that have done better than others in almost any situation. Isotonic, famously, that was the one that changed a trip around for me in Slovenia, and then came back and I just said everywhere I went I was putting this one on, and felt like I was catching for fun. It was that rod that would go every single time. And I've not had loads like that. The original pineapple that Tom swears by is another one that's incredibly good.
My favourite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
My
pink
favourite.
almond, the first
Great
almond
minds,
again.
Steve.
Yeah.
But then recently,
But I'm a confidence, and like I can't have a chuck like every chuck with a different flavour.
no, I get that.
So I'll
do
go with
get
my
that.
number one option, and pineapple has caught me so many fish.
Well,
Yeah.
we had a few to test last year, and I was up at Norton Disney, and I think I had 11 bites over the weekend, and no matter where I put one of the test ones called Pango, I had 10 bites on that one flavour, no matter where it was on the
Why
stock.
do you think that is, Neil?
They wanted it. I don't know
They
what
wanna
I
eat
don't know.
that.
I don't know if it's the
I think it's the taste.
taste, pH levels of. I don't know, but because I'm willing to try and have a little play around on that sort of venue where I'll put all the different goos out, keep changing, and I changed throughout the course of that trip. And I said to Tom then, I said, Pango's a good one. I'm going to keep using it, and it's done exactly the same. And I know Tom's now caught quite a few in it. I saw Pecky was using it the other day, and it's again going back to Tom said about coincidences. It's not coincidence.
It's not coincidence.
No.
It's actually the only one I've ever used that I thought maybe it's better than pineapple.
No,
really.
statement.
Really. And I've used
you
pineapple.
got
like-
used definitely
No, I haven't
with
got
the
any. I'm
bottle
just going to
today.
get some.
Genuinely, I think like even on a relatively difficult syndicate lake I'm fishing now, I put it next to my pineapples, and I always catch more on. And the Pango went. I was like, that's weird. And I put it out again, and it went again. I was like, well, I'm going to change the other rod over. Change the other rod over, and it went again.
What,
And
the
then-
other rod went?
Yeah, the other rod went, and then I've been back since, and I had like 9 bites in 24 hours, and that's almost like a season's worth on there to some people, you know. So it's like they definitely love that pop up. Then we went to the underwater. I put a pineapple and a pango out, and the roach kept coming down to hit the pango, and I was like, that's weird. That like they keep hitting that one and then not hitting that one, and the pango also makes it like a slightly off yellowy orange color, which I really like, not bright yellow like a egg yolky yellow sort of color. And then I changed the pango over to the spot where it was seeing more carp, and then I had 3 bites on it when it was really difficult. Really difficult.
Can't be ignored.
No,
Can't
no,
be
no.
ignored.
Obvious.
That's
No,
not a
That's obviously
coincidence.
quite a fruity one though.
It's fruity, but it's got like this sort of
Yeah.
horrible smell to it as well.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of butyric acid in it, which is what I put in my pineapple as well, and they absolutely love that. But it's, I don't know, it's weird, mate.
Have you ever had additives? And because like we have ground baits, certain ground baits that I am convinced are significantly better in certain situations and different times of year, more fish meal and more oil and more strength to the mix in terms of like a million billion %. I don't even think it. I know it makes a massive difference. I'm sure you're the same. Like, do you have that where you change it different kinds of flavors and different times a year?
Yeah, we don't use ground bait, but we have it with hook baits for sure.
Yeah.
Like we say as well, even though I use pineapple almost all of the time, I'm always happy to change one of my rods with something else, just in case they're into a different flavour or colour.
Yeah,
I think
colour's a big
colour's
thing
really
as well.
important.
That contrast.
What's your take on colour? What, as an outline at least, can you give us like a this for this and this for this?
Well, I think historically, until you've sort of proved it a little bit wrong this year, shallow water in the spring, it's pink, isn't it? Shallow, clear
Yeah.
water in the spring, they want a pink hook bait.
If it's clear, if it's really clear, pink seems to work really well. anything else, I just use yellow pineapple pop up or now pango one.
Right.
Yeah.
What about you, Steve?
Pink's my, obviously since we did Underwater 1, pink's like always my starting option.
Yeah.
But like I have noticed like a washed out yellow can be amazing sometimes for me, whereas it was rubbish on Underwater 1.
Yeah.
But I think that was a unit. Sometimes water clarity, obviously to film underwater, it's got to be crystal. So obviously pink was amazing in crystal clear water, but I've won stacks of matches on washed out yellow.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe in clear water, washed out yellow was obviously useless.
Yeah.
But what that showed me was sometimes a lot of people just stay with one hook bait, keep casting it out. There's no fish there.
Yeah.
But you could be on the wrong colour.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think fluorescent orange and fluorescent pink are very similar, as in how they look underwater.
Yeah.
And then fluorescent white, sort of fluorescent yellow, they're different.
Yeah.
So I've always, up until Underwater 1, I always used to think fluorescent pink is a really strong silhouette in coloured water. And if it's clear, fluorescent yellow is amazing. But obviously pink outfished
Perhaps
everything.
the other way around.
We've had it with every underwater we've done. Is that pink it just ends up outfishing everything, and I very rarely catch fish on pink in my own fishing, so it's really odd.
The same.
It's like I was thinking, why does the pink keep working on these underwaters when I'll try it most times when I go, because I look back at the underwaters and think, right, try pink again. It just never works as well. But
that's the same for me. Up until Underwater 1, washed out yellow was that's what I just always went with.
Yeah.
And then after Underwater 1, couldn't even get a fish to pick it up.
No.
And then it makes you doubt your own fishing.
Yeah.
So now I will start on fluorescent pink, and I catch loads of fish on fluorescent pink.
Yeah.
But sometimes I have a day where like an hour in, I'm catching an odd fish. Then you put the washed out yellow on, and it's every cast.
Right.
So,
I like see the colour of your logo at the top left hand side.
Yeah.
That sort of colour. So it's like it's probably 80% yellow, 20% orange. I think.
Is this
like
the
that.
Pango-y effect?
That's the
Yeah,
pango.
it is. Yeah.
Is
That's-
it?
Yeah. Good.
Little
Good
bit
Is
work.
like
Pango
this.
like a
Yeah,
It's the
you
Matt
should
Godfrey
definitely.
effect.
is Pango a
Godfrey
power smoke
goo.
or a bait smoke?
It's a supreme.
Supreme. So it's the thin one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And going back to what you said about the cloud and the bringing them down, we very rarely, probably to a fault, we don't use goo in that way. We don't use lots of it on a PVA bag so much. I mean, you doing the inside the solid bags, but we rarely put in like a big dab of it on the outside of something to create that cloud. I'm pretty much only using it on hook baits. But when Ian first bought us the goo, they told us to fish it you're still fishing it.
Yep.
Like smear the thicker stuff on the outside of PVA bags.
That's why I just asked about the
and we
power
went
or
fishing
bait.
with them in the beginning, and they were using it like that, and they caught loads of fish like it. So I used it a little bit like that. The almond one on PVA bags over Walthamstow probably 10, 15 years ago. But maybe we should think about that again.
But I always think I never bother soaking hook baits in it.
Yeah.
The main reason I love wafters because of the way they sit, etc.
You don't want to affect the buoyancy.
Yeah, and if I soak it into wafters, like put like 20 coats on it, the wafter sinks like a stone.
Yeah.
So I've lost my waft, and then that's just a confidence thing in my own head.
Yeah.
So all I'm ever doing is tagging a feeder,
right,
or putting it in
Yeah,
some ground bait.
Yeah, that's massive for me. Even if I was match fishing, I feel like I'd have to boost my hook baits.
Yeah, so we don't boosted hook baits isn't that common in match fishing.
No.
But you use them a lot.
We boost the actual pellets or the ground bait, but not the hook bait.
Yeah, see, I don't want to boost the thing that they're likely to be preoccupied on. I want to boost the thing that's got my hook on it.
Yeah, but I look at goo as like it's the attraction
into the area.
Not that they want. To me, I'm trying to create a scent cloud.
Yeah.
To pull fish in with goo, and then they'll eat my hook bait.
You need to try some smart liquid as well. As soon as we're going to throw your minds on bait, you got to.
But like, I've never really. The only reason I've tried gooing hook baits is they sink. But maybe if you gooed pop-ups, would they become wafters?
Depends how much you goo them. There's a fine line.
Yeah.
There is a fine line. But as long as your pop-up that you're gooing is very buoyant to begin with, for the type of rigs that we often put out, a spinner rig, you're not affecting that pop-up enough that it's not a pop-up for the duration that it's in the water for.
Yeah. But because our hook baits are so small, like 6 mil, like a load of coats of goo.
Yeah, but even one coat and a goo on a 6 mil hook bait is going to be better than having none on it.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. I just like if I'm going to coat something.
And that wouldn't sink. That will still be a wafter.
I like to proper coat it, so if you cut it in half, it's gone all the way through the bait.
Yeah.
So, but I will try now having listened to some Pango.
Honestly.
Yeah,
one thing that we've not spoke about in terms of bait and feeding and tactical stuff that I've believe and noticed, and the latest underwater that we've done with you and Bennett proved it more than anything in a different situation, F1s and carp, springtime, clear lake, is for us, bait falling through the water is so important. And it touches on the fact that goo creates a cloud to bring them in. It also touches on the fact that certain situations, an active ground bait with bits popping off it to bring them, stuff rising up to bring them in. Loose feeding bait, when we did I don't want to give too much away, but this is probably going to be out September, October time. The latest underwater with you and Bennett on the box, there'd be a devoid swim for 10, 15, 20 minutes and literally tapping a few pellets in, throwing a few maggots in twice. Like, it was every single time something fell through the water, they came. I think you could throw pebbles in.
Do you think it's the sound of it? Or the...
I think it's everything.
Sound and sight, I think visual.
I think as it's falling, it's making noise. I think they're just intrigued. This is really sad, but I used to work for a magazine, and I once went and did a feature with a guy called Tommy Boyce. You know Boyce, don't you, from Daventry?
Oh, Boyce, yeah.
Yeah, no, Boyce. Hey. Right hard bloke he is. Anyway, and we were on the upper River Nene on this little channel, and we were fishing for anything, but this particular day, all he was catching were perch. It were gin clear. And you could see everything. You could see a crayfish on the bottom. You could have read a newspaper on the bottom. It was that clear. And this day, all he could catch was perch, right? And I'm stood on these lock gates getting photos of him fishing and catching these perch. And there are roach everywhere. Everywhere. Big uns, like 2 ounce to 10 ounce, which in a match fishing thing, they're quality fish. And I'm like, he's not caught a single roach. When he shipped his pole out, it was only when I went up onto the lock gates to get a nice picture, he's shipping his pole out to like 13, 14 metres. And as he's shipping it out, obviously you've got a rig with a float, an olivette, some shot and a hook bait. As he flicked his top kit in, all the roach would like twitch that were in the area. And as he started shipping it out, they'd swim like dolphins up to his rig as he's shipping it. And they'd be like a foot, 2 foot under, following his rig going out. And as he lifted it up to lay it in, they'd all be sat like waiting for it, and it'd go plop plop. As he dropped it in, it'd go plop plop plop, his shots, his float. And as it fell, these big roach were swimming around it, loving it like dolphins playing. And as soon as it was all straight and still, they'd go, oh, and they'd just swim off. And it were like they loved the fact something was happening. He never caught a single roach that day, and there was thousands in his peg. He caught about 12 pound, a lovely chunky little perch. We got a great feature. But if you couldn't have seen what were happening, you'd have gone, there is not a roach there.
Yeah, bizarre.
But it was the fact that they loved the activity and what were happening. And
they were aware of it, that they could actually see it all happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, like, the fact that they can hear and see things falling and sense it, they come and just have a look.
I've had it before. Years ago, Woodlands First. Obviously, you probably wouldn't know Woodlands First, but we went practicing for a big match, and it's 5 foot deep on the pole. And I was sat next to my brother practicing, and I had a rig on that's like 0.75 fishing meat. Just going back a long time, meat might be banned there. It wasn't banned.
I did that a little while ago with the peanuts. I think was I allowed them or not?
It wasn't banned at the time. And literally, I sat next to my brother. He's getting a carp chuck, and I can't catch one. We're only like 10 metres apart. So I've gone up to him, and he's got a 0.2 rig on, really nicely strung out, really slow fall. Otherwise, I've got a bulk, so I'm bombing it down.
He's got shirt button style on his shot, has he?
Yeah, so anyway, all the lingo.
Go on, the shirt button.
So anyway, obviously, I watched him for a bit. So I'm like, can we swap rigs? So I'd caught 2, and he got like 15. So we swapped rigs, and I caught 10 in 10 on the 0.2 with the slow fall, and he couldn't get a bite on my rig. So there has to be something visual.
Yeah.
Because if it was just about being on the bottom, surely they'd eat
You'd have got theirs.
Yeah.
You'd have got there quicker.
I'd have got there quicker and caught them.
Caught more,
But ever since that day, I found myself a carp fishing lighter and lighter. I always used to fish as lighter float as I could get away with, because I was convinced that they maybe see it and then follow it. And that's like when I'm fishing on the pole for carp, I tend to like lift and drop all the time, just to try and create a little bit of movement. But like, obviously, don't want to give too much away. But Bennett in underwater was like anti. He believes in pinning the bait to the bottom, waiting for one to find it. Whereas I'm the opposite. Like, lift it.
Keep it moving.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
thinks movement can spook fish. I think a lot of how carp feed is visual.
Yeah, they need to
Yeah.
know where it is.
Yes.
If they,
I often think about moving baits as well, whether that would work, especially on zig rigs. If you had something that moved, like have you seen the video on Instagram of the guy fly fishing?
Oh,
for a
yeah,
carp?
incredible.
How good is that? It's like really. It looks like bone fishing. It's like 2 foot of water probably. There's a really big fish, probably 50 pound,
I've seen
and another one, little one next to him.
Yeah.
And he sort of he flicks a fly. It looks like a little black sort of larvae sort of thing he's using, but it chases it and misses it the first time, and then he does it the second time, and he sees that from 6-7 foot away.
Yeah.
This fish, and he goes, just nails it. He hooks it in the end. But great bit of footage. But it also shows that
Bit of movement.
they like a bit of movement. And even like when fish spawn as well in sort of I don't know what fish they would be, sort of early summer, little tiny fish like this. They definitely eat them as well. I've had them on the mat and they're coming out of their like their mouth and their gills and that way of eating them. So I think there's definitely something there to think about. As well.
Obviously, when you've done underwater, do you ever find, when you go to reel, because obviously we saw this in underwater too, when you reel your rigs in, the fish then come in. So they're aware that there was a line.
Yeah, they're definitely aware of the line, I think.
Yeah.
You fish with slack lines a lot, don't you? Like fluorocarbon and relax it and all of that.
Well, one of the things that we found out on the underwater this time is that I've sort of fished semi-slack lines with fluorocarbon, most of the time, unless I'm fishing a long way out. And the weight of the fluorocarbon, unless you fish it completely slack, where your bobbin's literally hanging completely flat down, the weight of the fluorocarbon that you think is like on the bottom, which it probably is, pulls up the bobbin this side, and it also pulls up your lead core that side. So the bit that you really care about, which is the last 3 foot, is actually worse because it's sort of pulling it down. So I ended up fishing slacker lines than I would do normally. But having said that, like if I'm fishing 100 yards out, 120 yards out, I fish pretty tight lines. Like looking at it now, probably my lead core's off the bottom sometimes. And I just don't think it matters as much as some people think it does. I think if you're getting everything absolutely right, you're getting the baiting right, you've got the right amount of fish in your swim, you've got the right hook bait on, that lead core or your tubing or the little bit of line doesn't matter as much as you think it does. I think they still just come down and nail the hook bait no matter what.
So do you think because obviously we as match anglers, you might feed a spot but not fish it for ages.
Yeah.
Do you do that? Obviously, feed spots, carp in, and not put a rod on it for like hours.
Yeah, we do
Weeks.
it. We do it with our main spot in the day. Like if we feel like that the fish are gonna turn up in the evening or there's a certain bite time, we'll happily kill the rest of our time and not have the line in the water at all, and just make the most of that time where you think is the best, because it'll be made most of if there isn't line in the water the rest of the time, because they're more willing to freely come in and feed.
Obviously, same as I always believe, obviously, if you don't catch the first one, they build up confidence on the spot. There's no lines, no hooks.
Yeah.
So they're not on. I know we're fishing for more fish, but they obviously the more confident they become, then when you chuck on it, they're not so fussed about the rig being in the way.
Yeah, the principles are still the same, aren't they? You know,
Yeah.
whether you're fishing for 10 carp or 100 carp, if they're more confident feeding, you catch them quicker.
I think that same principle works as well if you're using like we would call it like a match the hatch style hook bait, or like if you put out 10 spoms of bait and you put out 2 hook baits in it, and both of the hook baits are the same as what you're feeding, it will take a longer time for you to get a bite. But by the time you get a bite, there's now 5 fish in the swim feeding.
Yes.
And you haven't just caught the first one coming in. So your spot's likely to last a longer period. Might take you slightly longer to get each bite, but actually you're building your spot better because you're not catching them so quick.
Yeah.
So I think that happens certainly in the summer a lot.
I think that's so important in our fishing sometimes.
I always used to believe,
so important.
as soon as I sense a swim starting to die, is rest it rather than
Kill it.
kill it stone dead so I can't get a bite. So if I was getting a bite every 90 seconds, as soon as it starts to go to 2.5, 3 minutes, I'm like, I need to come off that and let the fish regroup rather than get into a stage where I can't even get a bite there.
Yeah.
Because I always think feeding fish attract more attract more. Whereas if you leave a spot completely barren, then it's not got much appeal for anything.
No,
they're like,
sure.
why is that spot barren?
Yeah.
There's a place I go in winter, Hallcroft on the pole, and when it's freezing cold, the worst thing you can do is pot your bait in and sit with your rig on it and catch the first one that comes in, it is so detrimental. You'll go bump, 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 catch 3, and you're absolutely knackered
that's it,
then.
done.
Yeah, whereas what you better doing is sat somewhere catching nothing, or be sat in the calf having a brew with your peg all nice and quiet, let a load of fish come in. I'm sure it's things like when they start feeding, they kick the bottom up, there's a bit more colour, a bit more competition, they spread your bait out a bit so they're not as tight, so they're even more confident when you do hook one. They don't spook as easily because they're not all as close together.
Yeah.
And you'll catch after everyone else. I'll let everyone else nail 6, 8 fish sometimes, and they'll be like, right, it's definitely time to go in. And they'll all have a massive lull, but then you can just carry on catching. Dent is the master at it there. He waits and waits and waits, and he's the last one to go on his long pole line, which is like the place where you're going to win. And he always ends up catching the most on it. And he just leaves them and lets them get confident.
Yeah, building confidence.
Yeah,
for
the
sure.
ones he catches are always bigger, and
Yeah.
he catches them for longer, and he keeps catching them till the end.
Yeah, I like it.
Interesting. One thing I've got to touch on while you two are sat here, and we are, do you think that scaling down matters? I've talked about this again in the office a lot, but your like one caster on a size 6 hook and all that, surely you guys fishing lighter would get you more bites. Surely.
My gut has always been that scaling down makes a difference when you're presenting a line directly down, like from a pole or a waggler maybe. But when all of our stuff is laying across the bottom, I'm not having it that a carp looks at my size 4 and says that hook's too big for this time of year. I'm gonna have to they can't pick out the difference between a size 6 and a size 8 hook.
Don't you think?
I don't think so.
Not even like the weight or waftiness of it or anything like that.
No.
No, because I think it's light, it's going to waft more.
The more I do, sorry.
Sorry, yeah. I'd say if it wafts more, that's going to look more alien. If mine's pinned down there until he picks it up, I just can't see it.
No, the more I watch the underwaters as well, I think their suction is so powerful. I don't even think wafters and bottom baits make a difference.
Really?
I really don't. Or critically balancing the pop up and all that. I just think I just don't think it just goes whoosh, straight to the back of their throat.
It flies.
Yeah, all the stones go in and like that ain't making a difference. I don't think. I really don't. I think the wafting and the critically balancing helps the rig sit out right, which is important. But I don't think it makes it. I don't think they suck it in and go, oh, there's a bigger hook on there, like Spoon's saying. No, I'm not having it. I do think though that you can pressurize an area too much with lines compared to the amount of bait you've got out there. I think like if you sort of look at it as if the worst situation would be 3 single hook baits right next to each other with 25-pound main line on, thick hook links and really big hooks, that would be like you wouldn't get picked up much. Whereas if you fished an area of 10 kilos of bait with one rod that was a thinner line and concealed well, that would be a really good feeding situation. You'd get more bites like that. So there's always somewhere in between to get to. Like if I'm fishing 2 rods on a spot or 3 rods on the spot, I'll put more bait on the spot if I've got 3 rods and I have 2 rods, almost to counteract the pressure of the other rod. Do you know what I mean? So I do think that they notice line and that, but when it comes to really small increments like changing from a size 4 to a size 8 hook, I don't think it makes that much difference these days, now that bigger hooks are just as sharp as the small ones.
What about you, Steve? Do you believe it makes a difference, scaling down and that kind of thing?
I think not for carp. No, I think the only way a carp can tell if there's something wrong is to suck it in. And then if it's big and heavy and it sucks it in, I think you've got a higher chance of hooking it. Yeah. I always remember when Guru first started coming up here with Dan and Damo and showing them like the hair rigs I was using, like size 16 hook. And Damo looking at it and saying, basically, there's nothing you can do with such a small hook, like mechanically, to affect it, to get it to hook anything.
No.
You're basically just working on the basis that it sucks it in, doesn't realise anything is wrong and tries to swim off with it.
Yeah.
Whereas I believe now, like a bigger hook for carp, I think F1s are a little bit different and silvers, but I think for actual proper carp, they find a bigger, heavier hook harder to deal with, and it turns quicker. It's like I'm quite into now, after watching you guys wear a hook fish, like obviously looking for the perfect hook holds, bottom lip. Like I caught one the other day in the top lip on a hybrid. I'm like, how on earth did it get hooked in the top lip? Because I try and think about now what my rig's doing. Is it turning?
Yeah.
It's actually getting it to turn quicker. And going to what you said about wafters, I don't personally believe wafters work better because they're a lighter hook bait. I just like the way they sit.
Yeah.
So I can get it to sit up.
Yeah, presentation-wise, yeah, for sure.
But I don't think because it's lighter I hook more fish.
No.
I think I catch more with a wafter because I can make it sit up and stand out.
Yeah.
Not because of its weight, because I agree with you. When they suck underwater, they can suck from quite a long way away and pull bait.
It all goes up.
Yes, yeah. But I do think it's like we've got a size 8 QM1 come in. I've been using them for like 2 years, obviously where allowed.
Yeah.
And I think I catch more fish on an 8. Because it's bigger, because it's heavier.
We had
We're
the mates,
allowed.
We had the mates done years ago, didn't we?
Yeah, the first 8s.
I used them.
Yeah, I didn't like the first 8s we had. I thought they were too thick in the wire, and I had a lot of fish. We
had a day testing.
We had a day
them,
testing, and literally at Boddington, tip would go round, lovely, pick up 2 turns, fell off. Like had 9 bites, landed 2.
Nothing falls off on a QM1.
No, yeah, but I tell you what, it felt like the wire was too thick, so it wasn't penetrating properly. So I was getting like. Literally, pop a bite, pick it up, and Matt will tell you, I like to give them a dig as well, just to make sure.
Yeah, like
yeah, but obviously,
like a tarpon.
yeah.
I feel like you've got to drive. It's different, obviously, if you've got 4 ounce lead on, because I presume that's doing the job.
Yeah,
for
certainly
you.
helping.
But our feeders are like sometimes only like 28 gram, which is
an ounce.
Yeah, and I feel with elastic in the rig as well, I want to drive the hook in. But with that original sample, they were just falling off, literally 2 to 4 turns, and I'd never lose fish at Boddington. So obviously we had the sample redone with a finer wire, more tapered towards the point, and they've been incredible.
More tapered towards the
point. It's like a finer point.
Finer point, yeah.
So actually so it got sharper and like not so thick at the point.
Yeah.
So I feel like a finer wire goes in better. And because of the shape of a QM1, I don't think it needs to be a massively heavy wire. Because if it's hooked in the mouth, it can't. Yeah, the pressure points are different, if you know what I mean.
I actually like lighter wire hooks as well.
Yeah.
Why is that, Tom?
The point, I think, the point taper. I think the point taper is really important. You guys use them. Are they wasabi points?
Yeah. We use different ones.
So you're keeping your points sharp enough for longer. But we don't need to do that. We just need the sharpest point we can possibly have for one fish. That's it. And I just feel like the thinner wired hooks go in better. They just look like they're going to hook better.
Yeah, I honestly think so many anglers miss out on catching fish because they're not using a sharp hook. Even in our fishing.
Oh, it's
100%.
Yeah. It's bad in our fishing as well. People think you're just spinning them a yarn to sell more hooks, but I go through how many hooks do we go through?
Yeah.
And I know it's out of order because we obviously get them for nothing. I know people are going to be saying that, but whether I did or didn't, I would not cast out a hook that wasn't super sharp. I feel like I'm wasting my time again.
Would you catch a fish, get the hook out, and go, it's all right, and chuck it back out?
Occasionally, I'll recast. Yeah, go through the same
or normally
process
is it one
of
fish,
testing
one
it.
hook?
I sort of touch it on my nail. I touch it in the side of my hand, and you get used to the way you test the hook.
Yeah.
If I've caught a fish and that still stands up to that, it will go straight back out. Kamakura hooks we do that are sharpened. It's rare you'll ever get a second bite of the cherry out of one of them because they are so sharp. But the normal, the standard range of hooks, I'll get a couple out of a hook a lot of the time. Some of the time, I won't say a lot of the time.
Yeah.
No, it's even like with roach fishing. When I go to Ireland, you can be speed fishing for roach. You get like 25 roach, and you'll miss a couple of bites, and start catching like one every 3 chucks. You put a new hook on, and every single one's nailed instantly.
Yeah, so you're getting great feedback.
Yeah, unbelievable. It's so obvious, like when your hook's not, and it's not like blunt as in it won't hook anything. It's just not. It's lost that razor sharpness.
It's just lost its edge. I do quite a lot of floater fishing, and I've always been one. I want to see the carp take my hook bait, and I'll strike as soon as that happens. And in that instance, you can get away with a hook being slightly duller. But recently, I was fishing at long range, at 120 yards on the top. You can't see everything going on, so I was fishing an 80-gram controller. Super sharp size 10 mixer out of the packet, and you'd just be watching. All of a sudden your clutch is spinning where you've hooked one, but you'd feel that hook and it would still feel okay, so you'd put it back out again. You wouldn't get another bite, and it just wasn't sharp enough to do it again. You had to keep changing it for that effect to work.
Do you think as well, obviously I know it's different because you could be asleep in your bivvy when you get a bite, it's quite important to get to the rod quite quickly? Or do you think it doesn't matter?
I'm always off my rod.
No, but obviously when we fish, like, again, some of the places we fish in winter, we sometimes sit back because you're only getting a handful of bites.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be sat holding the rod. But equally, if you're not quick, often they'll fall off.
We don't have them fall off so much.
No.
It's like if you were fishing out in open water, you could not pick the rod up and it'd still be on when you get back.
You fish a lot of barbless
Oh, it's all
hooks.
barbless, and obviously,
Yeah, I think that's the big.
I don't know what size lead you're probably. What's the lightest lead you'd use?
Well, I fish them till they come off anyway. 4 ounces I usually use.
Yeah.
4.25 ounce I like at the moment.
So different to us.
see,
That.
Yeah,
in winter, sometimes we're using like half an ounce.
Yeah.
yeah. You
So
need
obviously, then
something
they tend to. I think they shake themselves off.
Yeah, especially on a barbless hook.
Yeah.
It's exactly what
You're
they're
using
doing.
barbless all the time.
Yeah, we have to,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's the same. If you've got barbless hooks on, you need to be on them quick, and you need to have constant tension. Like if you get a bite on a barbless hook and they sort of come back towards you, it would just fall off straight away.
We quite often get like you can get a massive it can twitch and all drop back slack, and you know one's picked it up, and you just wind in because it hasn't upped it. And people I think it was a big liner. It wasn't.
Yeah, no, you've been done,
It upped itself,
essentially.
and because there was no pressure.
Yeah.
Obviously, because the bomb's so light, everything's so light, you just didn't
Just
prick it
comes
properly.
out.
Yeah.
For sure. The times we're on our rods and on the rods really quickly, which is what I'm doing a lot of at the minute, is snag fishing. You have to be on it super quick. So I've got my bobbins all the way to the top on the alarms locked up, and I've got my Delkims on very sensitive. So if I get 2 bleeps on one rod, I know there's a fish on the end. In fact, I was striking liners, weren't I, the other day because I
didn't want to talk about it.
Because
So embarrassing.
It's so embarrassing.
Twice.
No, because I was so on edge, I think I'm going to get one, and then you get a few bleeps, and you need to be on them. So it's so important that you're on them quick to get away from the snags that I'm willing to pick up the rod wrongly sometimes, but because you're fishing at 120 yards, you've got the snags literally 2 yards in front of where you're fishing. If you're not on them quick, you're losing them.
Is that on mono as well?
That's on mono.
So you've got stretch.
Very, very, very low stretch mono though.
We joke about it though, striking liners, which essentially what you did. But even if you hadn't have picked the rod up there and then, you're fishing at 120. If your bobbins drop that much and nothing's happened, you've got to redo it
That's
anyway.
what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I
but it
do
was just fun.
calculate it
Yeah,
in my
I know
head
you
as well.
do.
You
It was
think, well,
funny.
I've got to pick it up anyway, so I might as
That's
well
the
do it now
same
just in case.
with my quiver tip. If I'm fishing like a certain bend and it can drop like half an inch, I'm like, if I'm fishing a
Something's
hybrid
changed,
feeder,
that's
I'm reeling in.
moved. Yeah.
My head's
Might as
gone
well
up.
pick the
That
rod up.
feeder's moved.
Yeah, you're going to have to do it anyway.
Yes.
Do it as quickly as
might as
possible.
well just reel it straight in. As soon
Yeah.
as that feed, because underwater's taught me like as well, a half-inch drop back could actually be quite a big movement
Yeah.
at the other end.
Yeah, definitely.
For it to actually register. So as soon as I think my feeder's moved, that
Yeah.
trap's gone.
That's one of the reasons I use big leads as well, is because liners can turn into the lead moving on your spot.
Yeah.
Certainly when you're fishing a long way out and you've got a lot of stretch in the line and the line quite tight, like it can really bounce the lead off the spot quite easily. Whereas if you're using heavy leads, it's like they just sit there.
Putting
nice
more
and
odds in your
sturdy.
favour, aren't you?
Very rarely get it move unless something's pulled from the other end, don't you know?
Do you think the scope for you in the body situation
Using heavier
to
feeders.
use a really heavy feeder?
Yeah, possibly, yeah. I always remember, like, obviously in the early days of method feeder fishing, Andy Finley, he used to have ridiculously heavy methods because we were fishing tight to islands on a slope. So everyone would be fishing with, I don't know, let's say 30 gram. He'd have 50 to try, obviously,
Try and
which
hang
is
up there as
still
long as
nothing by
possible.
your standards, but
Yeah.
for a match angler, 50 grams is a lot.
More chance of it holding on at the
Yes,
side of the island.
yeah, and also picking up, obviously, when they pick it up, more weight to bolt against.
definitely.
Because I do think if there's not enough weight, they can get rid of it a lot easier.
Yeah.
What do you boys think because you've seen a bit of our underwater and you speak to us quite a bit? Like, what's your honest take on our rigs? Do you think you could come in and make our rigs better, knowing your mechanics and experience with rig mechanics?
Yeah, I think when we were watching the Bream film, which was fantastic, by the way.
Yeah. You fish for them by design.
Yeah, when you first putting out them really long hook links and getting done, we were like, well, yeah,
Yeah. Of course they are.
yeah. So like we would, I think there's a few things that we would change. So yeah, probably make them a little bit more effective.
One of them looked so long, it was like the bream picked it up, it went and fed off somebody else's spot, came back, and you still just reeled it in, not knowing it was on in the first place.
That's why I laughed when you said Bream are clever.
Dan obviously come in, didn't he? He wasn't overly impressed with our rigs.
No.
Big mechanics.
I think there's a fine line because Dan is so rig orientated that he really goes down that rabbit hole. You know, I do the same with bait actually, and I try and have a rig that I feel like works most of the time, but I can use in almost every situation. So I don't go down the hole thinking I need to change this and do this all the time.
Well, what is it? What's your go-to, Tom? What's your go-to rig? I've got to ask you.
My go-to rig is now a bit of lead core about that long on a helicopter setup, which means that you've got the lead on the bottom and the rig is spinning almost
like the heli rig we used to a degree.
Yeah. And then the bead about that far above where the lead is on the bottom, so the rig can slide up a little bit on the lead core. So if it lands on something soft on the bottom, the actual hook link can sit above any shit that's on the bottom. And then I've got a spinner rig with a really stiff fluorocarbon boom, about 6 inches long, and then a size 4 crank hook, very, very sharp one, on a spinner setup, and then a small pop-up on the back of that crank. If I get them feeding in the right situation, I can use that rig all the time, and it converts really well because we've just seen it on the underwater, and I don't lose many fish on it either.
Does it kick out straight every time?
Kicks out beautifully every single time, and even if a fish comes in, messes around with it, and if it is to get done, it still sits back out. If a load of roach come in and suck the pop up in and push it back out and push it around, it's still sitting out right. That's one of the main things for that rig that is so good. And the reason that you can cast it anywhere and it's always sitting proud. That's the thing. If a carp comes in, my pop up's sitting there and it can eat it if it wants, and if it wants to suck it in, it will go into its mouth. And if you've got a sharp hook, a big sharp hook, you normally get them.
What about you, Spoons?
Yeah, not dissimilar. I tend to use leg clips more than I think I use helicopter rigs. I use helis when the bottom's particularly soft or you're over a bit of weed and you feel like you need to. But I use a running leg clip, bit of tubing behind it, and exactly the same. I use 7 inches of the same boom.
Fluorocarbon.
Yeah, £25 boom.
Obviously, question for both. If you know a hybrid feeder,
yeah.
If you were using a 4-inch short length on a hybrid feeder,
yeah.
would you use fluorocarbon?
Not if I'm tying it directly to the hook, because it's quite stiff, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Because obviously I don't use fluorocarbon because I always think movement's important.
We're tying the boom, the fluorocarbon to a swivel.
Right.
And then your hook attaches to the swivel, so you've got.
So the fluorocarbon's there
movement
to kick your hook
to push it away. Exactly.
Yeah.
And exactly as Tom said, we all know that not everything that picks up that rig is getting hooked every time. So if they do reject it, it just pushes away again. It's ready for the next one.
See, I always believe, because I watch all your stuff and think like how technical you are, and if you can't hook every single fish, we've got no chance.
No, I'll tell you what. One thing you have got is a really normally a really competitive feeding situation,
which makes it easier.
Yeah, and when we've got that as well, we convert more.
Yeah,
and I think even if you use really simple rigs, if you've got them feeding that hard, you can catch them on almost anything, you know. So I don't think it's always a toss up between is the rig caught it or is the feeding situation caught it and how confident they're feeding, you know.
Because I loved it on the underwater you did, obviously when Dan said he was going to be one for one, and then obviously you did the comment and said he was so confident in his rig, he scrapped it and started again.
Yeah, hilarious. It's a great trip that. But yeah, Dan thinks so much about rigs. He's got loads of rigs in his armoury. I just haven't got them.
No, I'm a confidence, and I don't believe you can be one for one, and I accept that.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, so I can accept if I can catch a percentage which is higher than most, then that's still good enough for me because I just don't believe every fish is catchable. Not every time it sucks the hook bait.
No, it's all too different every single time. Yeah.
And I think applying what you've just said there, accepting the fact you can't catch every single one, but knowing that everything we spoke about earlier on in the show, the bait, the feeding, getting them there in the first place, having the right hook bait on, you're stacking what we've just said about being confident in your rigs and accepting they won't always convert, combined with ultimate confidence in your bait, your feeding, the area that you're feeding, the way you've got them feeding. Like, it's a winning combo, that. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. If you're doing everything really well, you don't expect to get it all 100% right, but then you get good results if you're doing it all pretty good.
It's like underwater too. We were catching a bream every 3 minutes. If you do that in a match, you've won every single match.
Yeah, that's right.
But Dan wanted to catch one every 10 seconds.
Yeah, he would.
Whereas I'm like, this is amazing fishing.
Yeah.
And if I couldn't see underwater, I'd be like, this couldn't be any better.
But
Dan was like, this is rubbish. There's a swim full of bream. You should be catching one.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're all sitting here in this office, because he thinks everything can be better all the time. Yeah. And it often can.
It can be improved, but like I said, I still think 1 for 1 is
ambitious.
Yeah.
It's ambitious.
For one.
Maybe it's possible in the end, and that's what we're all seeking for, isn't it? But I think if you're getting 4 out of 5,
I think that's
if you're getting even 3 out of 5,
Yeah,
if
I'd take that.
if you've done everything else right and you're getting them 5 chances quickly, then you're good to go.
Yeah.
That could be the title of your second book, 1 for 1.
1 for 1.
There you go.
The impossible
Dan's
dream.
going to have to do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Once we get there in the end.
Boys, I've got a few questions to ask all of you. Quick fire. I want
God.
pretty quick answers. These are from guys and girls from Instagram. We did a little story yesterday just to include everyone who follows all our stuff across Corda, across Guru. We let them know that we've got you 2 stars here, Steve Ringer and myself, unfortunately.
About your hairline, do you reckon?
What?
I'm just saying.
No hairline ones, although it's shocking hairline room. This is really. You're probably the best of the
Thank
bunch.
you. Take that.
He's starting to go, though.
Let's have a look,
Have you
Spoons.
noticed this? Andy's going great.
Give me
I'm
a
not.
little. You are a little bit, you know.
Who do you think's going first out of the 4 of you?
I've
You.
gone.
Oh.
See you later, Steve. You can't talk.
I've already gone. So
Yeah, you.
what I mean is, who's next?
It's you, then me.
And then me, and then Matt.
Yeah.
I think
Then
it's,
Spooner.
I
Matt are
mean
pretty
this in the
similar, I
nicest
reckon.
way.
You
No,
I don't know.
I think it's
Yours
close
is getting
between.
thinner, Matt. And it's going back, isn't it?
And I'm knackered because it's ginger anyway.
No, I don't matter anymore.
I think it's
Who
close
cares
between
anyway?
Dovey and Matt. Matt's just gone quick. That's been the main thing for you.
You're good, mate. You're all right, mate.
Stress
You ain't
since I've been
bad.
doing
It's-
the
it's
podcast.
funny enough
I
since we've
genuinely
worked
don't think you're bad.
Well, do we say that again?
I give you grief because it's something to play on.
Right.
But I don't think it's changed a lot in the past 10 minutes.
No, Benny.
Yeah.
Good one.
Zach Miles, Spoonie and Spoonie?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
DJ Spoonie.
Called worse.
Spooner and Dovey, will you please book onto an open match so we can all see how you get on?
We would get annihilated.
You wouldn't.
I'm happy to do that if I can have one of you two sitting next to me.
What a film that'd be.
Make a great video.
Yeah, great. Yeah, honestly, I would love to go and do that. Genuinely.
Just
Yeah,
to be a good film.
I would 100% be up for it. It's
Yeah, I
still a
think
bit
it'd
of
be
match.
mega.
What about the next Spooner and Dovey versus? That'd be good. Matt can coach one and Ring can coach the other.
Another great shout.
Actually, should we see if we can win a match with you? Are you allowed to have? Are you allowed to
Yeah.
have?
Yeah,
like,
as long as
chaperone?
you don't cast out for you, net your fish, or
Yeah, that's fine.
You can't
And we
spot
can-
over
we can
your
use
eye.
your kit
Yeah.
then, can't we?
We can go me versus you on a match.
Yeah,
with
we
one
each
of
have-
these two each.
That's a great shout.
Great idea.
We're in for that.
Yeah, we'll do it next week.
Right, there you go. There you go, Zach.
Cheers, Zach.
Great name, this one. Sandy Lung. I don't know what that means. What's the best way to position a rod when playing a fish, upwards or sidewards?
So it depends what you want the fish to do.
A little bit of detail, but not too much.
I think I tend to find if I keep the rod lower to the water, the fish comes up in the water. If I've got the rod up in the air, the fish is staying down. So it depends where that fish is going in relation to where my other rods are.
Mm-hmm.
So if I think I'm a master at wiping out Dovey's rods as well.
is that deliberate?
Sometimes, Steve, when there's a match involved.
I think if you don't want the fish to go through your other lines, you should have the rod on the side.
Yeah.
Because the angle is like this
They
instead
stay
of like
straighter.
this.
They do. If they
Yeah,
keep
because
it
if like
low.
if you had a pole and you wanted to wipe somebody else's rods out, you wouldn't do that past their lines, would you? You would do that and then move it left or right. So if your fish is going left or right, just play it like this. It would normally stay the same height in the water column anyway. And even if it is to go over them, if you've got the rod at the same height, it should just come back past the lines. Whereas if you've got the rod right up like that, it's a bit of a nightmare. If you're fishing in weed, I would have the rod high, because then not much of your line is touching the weed in between where the fish is and where the bank is. If the fish is already in weed and you want to get it out, you need to get as much height as you possibly can to get it out of the weed. For speed, I would probably have it on its side to try and get it in quickly.
Yeah, crank it
so
through.
you're not pulling it up and in the
I
water,
think
you're just
when you're winding them low, it's less pressure. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not when you got it high. You're trying to pull them out. They feel like they're being pulled out of the water.
yeah.
So
I
they
feel
fight
like
harder.
I feel like probably lose less fish if the rod's to the side as well. If I'm a rod up, I think you're maybe pulling it at a
Making
weird
a
angle,
weird angle.
especially
Yeah,
from the
I
bottom
think
lip.
so.
I think probably
lost that one.
from the side mostly. I'd
I
say.
always fight in my head, like not repeatedly changing the angle as well.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like to try and keep one angle
Right, okay.
low and then literally only lift when I know where it is.
Yeah, you boys will know better than us with that whole situation.
Interesting, you're all similar. Low is the consensus, unless you need to get them over some weed or snags or out of weed.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I always think
Yeah,
whenever I play one high, it can wipe out. Obviously, our pegs are tight. I used to fish with a guy, and
That's an understatement.
he deliberately used to pick up high, and he'd basically just steer them for everyone's lines, wipe everyone out, so no one
Very
could.
shrewd.
So no one could fish. So no one could fish, and he'd always be like, "Oh, sorry, coming through."
with a really loose clutch. Sorry, I can't do anything with it.
He was doing it deliberately, so you couldn't fish. Because obviously, once you're tangled, you have to sit there and wait. You can't chuck another rod out because you've already got a rod in the water.
I'd wind into his line and pull like crazy.
I would. Yeah, damn straight.
I would.
Yeah, if he's doing it regularly, and you know he's taking
he
the
was
mick.
well known for it. And he'd wipe out.
What were his names, Steve?
I can't going to say.
Yeah, I was about to say you can't
Andy
remember.
Bennett.
No, I'll say what his name was. His name was Dave Rossi. You might
Right,
know him.
Dave.
Dave Rossi, get in here now.
Is he the one asking the question?
No.
That was Sandy Long.
Emily Bacon, I think this is aimed at the carp boys more. She says, what's the best rig setup for this time of year? I'm currently using a running lead clip and only catching small fish.
I would say that's not because of the running lead clip, for sure.
No?
I don't think catch bigger or smaller fish on lead setups. You use a running... I use a running lead clip quite a lot as well. Certainly at Gigantica I do. But like I said, going back to what we said earlier, I use a helicopter because I feel like I can use that in most circumstances, and it's good enough in all circumstances, I'd say. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think there's a rig that's going to change that. It often comes down to the venue they're fishing. If you're fishing a lake that's got lots of small ones in, that's what you catch, lots of.
I think as well, Emily, listening to everything that the boys have spoke about in this show, the feeding, the bait choice, the timings of your fishing, all that's a lot more important towards size of fish, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Million
If
%.
you're consistent with getting bites, bigger ones will naturally come along. It happens.
Knowing what you know now, what would the carp boys do to improve the match boys' rigs? I think we've touched on that pretty much, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't. It was the length that really threw us initially, I think.
Probably shorten them down a little bit. I wouldn't shorten them down too much. I think you definitely can go too short. I would probably up the hook sizes, and I would have sharper hooks on more of the time.
See, it's a strange thing because obviously underwater too, ferry meadows, but like you can go to Ireland and you put a metre hook length on it and you'll catch a big roach every single chuck. Put 50 centimetres on.
A metre hook length?
Yeah, a metre. Yeah. And you're not catching them on the drop. You're waiting like 3 minutes for your bite on a metre hook length, yeah? You put 50 centimetres on, just sit there, you wouldn't know there's a fish there.
It'll be a,
a
presentation thing.
Yeah, that blows my mind because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I don't think that's a mechanics thing. I think it's a presentation thing. If you could get the same presentation as that long hook link, but with a short hook link, you'll catch more, I think.
Yeah, possibly, but it always blows my mind because when you're catching these big roach, you think, if I put a shorter hook length on, I'll see the bites quicker, everything will be better. You put 50 centimetres on and you're like, well, they've obviously gone now. So you put a metre back on and wait 4 minutes and one pulls your rod in and you're like, how...
Yeah, strange.
Without seeing underwater, I don't know what the difference is.
Yeah, you've got to understand as well. We've got to talk only about carp match fishing because there's no way I could give any advice on any sort of silverfish or perch or anything like that. I've never done any of that fishing.
One question, obviously, we haven't said, but this is from my own fishing. Do you always fish if you're baiting a spot? Do you always fish bang on it?
Oh, this is something we were talking about the weekend.
Because I don't. That's why I'd be interested in what you think.
I think. Do you mean the distance? How close you are to the free bait?
Yeah. Say like I was baiting a spot at like 25, 27 meters. I know you fish further out. Yeah. Hypothetical. Would you then want to put your bait right in the middle of it, or the back edge, the sides, or do you just vary it? Or
I think if I'm fishing with two rods, I'll clip up my spom rod and my hook baits, like my fishing rods, at the same distance generally, so there's a tiny bit of swing back, so I'll be on the front edge of my bait almost all of the time.
Front edge, closest to you?
The closest edge, so my line isn't going through my bait. Like they can eat bait without touching my line essentially. And I would always try and spod just past my right hand rod and just past my left hand rod, so that they can always get to bait before line. I don't want the line way off the side of the bait either side. So if they're coming in from the sides, they're touching line first. If the fish have been feeding on that spot for an awful long time, I'm happy to move my hook bait slightly further into the bait because they've gained confidence on that spot. Yeah, but I'll always start near to the edges of the bait and on the near edge.
You'd never put like a rig off the back.
I don't, but I know some carp match anglers do throughout their.
That's how I catch.
48
I
hours.
catch loads of fish. Like say,
First thing they hit is they're drifting.
say I'm
in.
loose. I can catch fish. Say I'm loose feeding 8mm pellets, and they're going like 30 meters. I catch loads of fish at 35. Like
Yeah.
there's no bait there, but if you don't feed at 30, I can't catch the fish
You're
at
giving
35
them nothing
either.
to come in on.
But it's like if you chuck up. Sometimes if they're going mad, obviously you chuck it on your bait. But when it's hard, sometimes you can catch a lot of fish at 35, so 5 meters past.
Yeah.
But nothing on your bait. But equally, if you don't feed,
Yeah.
you don't catch anything at 35
Yeah,
either.
Is that in I would worry about the lines being.
Yeah, because I think that's probably a different stock of fish,
Yeah.
and also the fact, obviously, our fish. When I'm doing it, there might be 40 blokes all feeding 30 meters in a line, and then chucking straight on, and those fish know the bait's there, but they're swimming along the back all the way along.
Yeah, I think that's something that would make a difference for us, but we don't play around with it enough. Because like Harry and Dalibor, these are like two of our consultants in Croatia. They're very, very good carp match
Very good.
anglers, and they play around with distances quite a lot on their clips. They said, "Oh, if it goes quiet, put another 2 meters onto your clip."
Yeah.
But we don't even play around with that much, do we?
No, you tend to stick. You might go, certainly not 2 meters past.
No. We will do more.
Yeah.
That is a massive thing in our fishing.
Is it?
Skimmers,
Yeah.
Carrassios, pole fishing, feeder fishing, waggler fishing,
What,
fishing
fishing past
pasture
the
bait
bait,
is
yeah.
I watched
massive.
Billy Flowers and Jamie Londers do it at Burners. They were fishing a spot, the going spot. They caught quite a few, and it just died. Not for long. They had a 2-hour dead spell. So Jamie wound one of his rods in, put a solid bag of rod length past, and it went in his hand.
Really?
It's like they're just hanging off the back a little bit more. Perhaps, like we're saying, once a spot's been fed on continually, they'd perhaps get a bit more aware of it. Yeah, just went past it, went instantly.
Sometimes, not to dwell on this too much, sometimes being very, very aggressive on a spot with bait and then feeding a little bit of bait just past it is good. Almost, again, in a competitive environment, a line of people, if you can go, here, lads, this
Get
is
on
the
that.
dominant area. If you try and fish on it, there's so much bait, you
Can't
can't pick
catch
them
it.
off. But all you do is win everyone's fish, and the fish are going, well, we're going to settle on and around this because there's a load of bait. But then to actually catch them and convert, you have to just go, here's a little trap, just past, got one.
Yeah.
Here's a little trap, just past, Walter Land, that kind of thing.
Right.
One of Dan's mates, I won't say his name, so I don't know if he'd want his tips going out there, if you like, but he fishes over lots and lots of boilie. Like when he goes gigantic, he puts out, I think it's 10 or 15 kilos of boilie in quite a big area, but doesn't ever fish on top of it. Fishes well to the sides, well short, well through it. And his theory being that there's this big bed of bait that they're going to come in and sort of have
Hop
a feed
around,
on every now and then, but just a random solid bag.
Yeah,
And he's had loads of
That's
the
the
big
same
ones.
principle. I use that principle a lot. I fire ridiculous quantities of bait in to try and win the fish.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But equally, I've fed so much bait that they become different. But if you fish just off the back of it,
yeah, you're nicking them as
They'll
they're
just
coming
pick it
in and
up,
out. Yeah.
And you're happy just to have the line through the bait then?
yeah, because they're not on it. And if I start getting, obviously, I'm dealing with loads more fish. But if I start getting liners, I'll just drop back onto the bait.
Yeah, you know they're there,
Yeah.
so yeah.
But it allows me sometimes to catch on an area long before anyone else, and it also allows me to be more aggressive.
Well, you can still keep putting bait in.
Yeah, because
even if you think it's there, if you think the noise is bringing them in, you can still bait up that spot knowing that you're fishing off of it anyway.
Yes.
It does make a lot of sense.
Because I'm trying to, obviously, because the swims are so close together, you've got to try. Sometimes you've got to win your fish, and the only way to win is to overfeed.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you overfeed and try and fish on it, you can't catch. But if you go 5 meters past, and it's almost like sometimes the carp know there's bait there, but they're just reluctant to
Commit.
commit
Yeah.
to it. But
Yeah.
if you put a bait over the back of it, because I think they're forced over the back by the line of anglers, they'll pick that up, but they won't come. And they hear. I think they hear the noise. They hear the bait falling.
Yeah.
But then they're like, oh, don't really fancy that.
Yeah.
But so they just sit off the back, and you can catch. I've had it on days where I've caught like 150 to 200 pound and not caught fed like 10 pints of pellets, not caught a single fish over my bait.
Really?
Every single one's at the back.
Wow.
Right. Okay. Yeah. We should try these things. We've got free rods all of the time.
Yeah.
That's why I asked. 'Cause I didn't know sometimes whether you like, I'll risk one rod over the back. But I get your theory. A line running straight for the middle of your bait might not be the best
Yeah.
idea.
It's not good.
But that we probably think that more than putting it down to practice, don't we?
Probably,
Because
yeah.
it's rare. We just think, oh, we don't want that through it, but we don't try it. We don't actually. I can't think of the last time
I think
fished.
people probably do it by mistake sometimes and catch loads and don't realise they're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because your rods would be much longer on the clip then, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Which is what some people do anyway, don't they?
Yeah.
No, yeah, to get the swing back and not actually get the
See,
swing back.
that's another question.
Maybe
You might have a more definitive. What do you, if you say you're spodding, how much do you allow? Like, because obviously spod's on the surface, your rig's got the swing back.
Yeah, yeah, and generally the same, because I'll think, unless it's super deep, then I'll cast a marker float out, put the marker up, and then just clip my spawn to the marker float.
Right, yeah.
Like they used to do, basically. So you know you're exactly bang on.
Yeah.
Whereas anything that's like over 50 yards and under, say, 10 or 12 foot deep, the swing back you get is very small amount, especially with the way I hit the clip. I'll make sure that I hit the clip with the rod out dead straight, hitting the clip so it pulls the line out
like
straight.
less than a metre swing back.
Oh, yeah. I get almost... we done an underwater at Norton last year, which I didn't actually end up featuring in the film because the bit that we filmed, there was no fish there. But it was 70 yards, was it? 65 yards?
Yeah.
65 yards, 8 or 10 foot deep. And I think I allowed that much or something on the clip, pretty much the same. And I was landing smack on the bait every single time.
Do you think that's because you've got such a heavy lead on, that helps?
I think it's, yeah.
Whereas with light lead, you could get more.
Yeah, definitely.
Swing back, I mean.
Yeah,
And,
swing
and
back,
how
you
you're
will.
holding the rod once it's hit the clip.
If you've got a really heavy lead that's
Straight
that
and
you
everything.
hit the clip really hard and it pins the line out straight, then you have the rod in front of you the same every single time, and your line's definitely straight between you and the lead. You're good to go on your bait, I think. Some people cast out, hit the clip, pull the rod back a little bit so they definitely feel the drop. I can feel the drop with the lead, with the rod down here, but if people aren't as experienced or that's just the way they like to do it, you're definitely pulling that lead back by doing that, obviously. Yeah. So by the time that it hits the bottom, you put your tip forward, there's slack line, and if there's slack line, you're not tight to the bait. So have that rod in the same spot every single time, clip up the same, and just make sure that you hit that clip perfectly before you put the rod down.
It makes me think, because sometimes I often think light feeder, less disturbance, but then listening to you, I'm probably sacrificing accuracy.
Definitely are.
Do you know what I mean? By going, because you think really
I think
light.
definitely.
I think that in my fishing, like listening to you then, I'm thinking instead of fishing like 30 gram, I could fish 40 or 50.
Yeah.
And be far more accurate, make casting easier. And they probably wouldn't make any difference on the splash.
No.
But there's a massive tendency in match fishing, if the water's shallow, to try and get to a distance with a stupidly light feeder.
Yeah, no.
To make it less splash. And in actual fact, you can hit the clip every time, but there's obviously a lot more bow. So there's probably a lot more variation in where it's
actually landing.
Yeah.
Right.
I've gone from 10 years ago to having like 2 or 3 different lead sizes in my bag. So if you go into my barrow now, all I've got is 4.25 ounce leads. Even if I'm fishing 40 yards out, I'm still using a 4.25 ounce lead, just so it straightens out nice all of the time. There's no.
It makes sense, and it wasn't until you just said it that I started to think. Like I'm going to a place called Southfield tomorrow, which is really shallow, and we try and fish like 28 gram at like 60 meters.
Oh no!
And but there's one lad actually. I'm not going to say who he is because again, it's probably a little edge. He fishes
What's his name, Steve?
I'm telling you, he fishes really heavy feeders, and like he's come from a carp fishing background actually, and it makes me wonder whether
I know who it is.
Yeah, and
Can I say his name?
Go on then.
Is it Joe Jagger?
No.
Oh.
And he's very he's obsessed with being really accurate, and he does really well then. But everyone's like, why has he got like 50 gram on? But maybe from a carp fishing background, he realises that accuracy and straightening everything is much easier with 50 gram rather than like walloping it with 20 gram.
Yeah, definitely.
Trying to get it out there, and then when you're tightening up, you've got like 6 turns of the reel before you even tight.
Yeah. Well, our line diameters have gone up over the years. Like, in fact, everything's gone a little bit heavier. So we've got stiffer rods, we've got thicker line, and if you use that setup with a smaller lead, you just cannot get it perfectly accurate all of the time. It needs to all go up at the same rate. So we have got thicker line, but I've now got a bigger lead that still stretches it on the clip and it still sits out nice. So it's not you're not falling short. I'm definitely not falling short.
No, gents, that's been absolutely awesome.
Yeah, it's really good.
Can we do it again?
100%.
100%.
And can we sort a day on the bank art?
Yep, we're going to do that match.
Right.
Who's getting who? Should we figure it out now?
Have you got a coin? You got a coin, Tobes? You got a coin, Steve?
I've got a coin.
And can we do like a feeder match?
Yeah, feeder. Matt loves feeder.
All right, guess my phone. I've got my phone. If my phone's in my right hand, it's me and you. If it's in my left hand, it's me and you. Yeah, does that work?
then you're just picking it.
Yeah, you're just picking who you want.
All right, yes, I'm gonna work.
No.
Right, tell you what. Tom and Neil, rock, paper, scissors, the winner gets the pick.
Oh, I don't want to pick. I don't care.
No, because you pick Steve. He's...
I'll tell you what.
No,
I've got an idea. I've got an idea.
Just,
Go on then.
Hang on.
Number generator.
No, I've got a T-spin app.
Right.
So,
Oh yeah, I've heard about this.
let's edit this one down.
This is going to be good.
Do you use this in the office, Neil?
Yes.
Should we have a wager between us as well?
We'll have to
Against
because
the pairs.
you won't do anything if there's not
there
a bet
needs to be
involved.
there needs to be a
Can you
side
not
bet.
fish for
Money.
Yeah, side bet money, even if it's 50 quid or something between me and Neil.
I'm surprised you've never done like the
50
match
quid.
carpet.
I would actually love
I
the
think you would,
I
yeah.
would. I would love it. Yeah.
Maybe this will get him into it if we do it.
Oh, mate, I've got so many hobbies. I'll never be at home.
I reckon we should just do 100 quid a man in a pot.
Yeah, could do, yeah. Where are we going?
Make it interesting, won't it?
Yeah, I don't
big
mind.
match,
that. We'll
innit, then?
We'll do whatever.
100 quid a man. Tobes will chuck 100 in just because he's part of the show.
He can create some odds and.
Yeah.
Right, it's fine. Just do it like that, isn't it? I've got spoons and Godfrey and spoons and Ringer. Whichever
yeah,
one wins.
yeah.
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 Okay. Start this round. So
Oh, it's spinning.
spinning.
Good spin, that.
Spoons and Godfrey.
Yeah! All right,
Well done,
partner.
mate, partner.
We'll go somewhere long range, so that's out.
Hope everyone listening enjoyed that. I bloody loved it.
We certainly
Okay,
did
yeah,
as well.
same. I look forward to the match. Let's get it sorted for the next few weeks.